Can I welcome everybody to this morning's emergency executive? I don't think we have any apologies submitted. We've still got Councillor Coombs missing, but I'm sure she'll join us. She's maybe having to deal with something domestic as well. Do we have any declarations of interest? No. Okay, thank you. We move to item 3, which is a minute of the emergency executive held on the 3rd of September. Are we happy to agree that as a true and accurate minute?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay.
Agreed.
Is there anything that anybody would wish to raise in relation to the minute that's not perhaps covered elsewhere? No. Okay, thank you. We move to item 4, which is a referral from the Audit Committee, Corporate Risk Management update, and I think that will be Mr. Smale or Mr. Ritchie. Mr. Smale, thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning to all. I think this is a relatively straightforward paper. It asks you to consider and approve the Corporate Risk Register, which has been referred on from Audit Committee, where it was considered in some detail previously. As you'll see from the attendant papers, the register has been extensively updated, most particularly to reflect the COVID risk dimension, which permeates so much of what services are involved with. Maybe just draw your attention in the actual report that went to the Audit Committee, which sits behind the cover report, in terms of paragraphs 3.2 and 3.3, which just set out the respective roles of the Audit Committee and the Executive. I'm not proposing to go into detail, Convener, not least with an eye to the size of the agenda, but of course, if members have any points that they would wish clarification on, I'm happy to try and address. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smale. As has been said, the paper has been to audit and has been scrutinised, and there was some very good questioning around the plans. It was noted that in addition to COVID-19, there was a need to highlight the compounding impact of Brexit, and that has been very much peppered throughout the paper and allowed things to rise to the top of the risk register to where the highest risks are. It's been demonstrated out that the risk registers had an impact on the risks of both COVID and potentially Brexit, and the mitigation that we have is the ability to influence is quite limited just because of the current climate, and that needs to be taken into part of a recovery plan. Also highlights the need for a clear plan and decision making by Council in order to mitigate and manage the risks. And there's a number of areas highlighted also in the paper for a deep dive. This will, however, be subject to a change depending on the circumstances around the pandemic and resources available as a result of that. So as this paper has been in to Audit Committee and there is no division, I'm happy to move the recommendations. Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Convener. As you say, yes, there's no doubt COVID-19 has provided us, Falkirk Council, with certain challenges, but not only has it affected the Council, but its partners and all our communities. Risk management is routine within the Council's decision-making process and increased importance during this very unstable situation we find ourselves in. In Table 3, you will see climate change is high priority across all services, and we must keep this at the forefront of our thoughts going forward, particularly in relation to the SPR, the Strategic Property Review, agenda item 7 later in the meeting. This report highlights that going forward, the organisation will change due to COVID and indeed the Council of the Future Transformation Programme. New ways of working, with working from home and mobile and flexible working being commonplace and the new norm. Happy to second this report.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. I will put up for any questions or comments from members. Councillor Nimmo.
Just really a point of clarification, convener. If you look at 5.4, it says there's no risk implications. But then if you look at page 14, it's 6.4, there's actually a list. What's what here?
Okay, Mr. Smale, are you able to give some clarification around that?
So it's 5.4 in
The covering report for today.
in the covering report. Sorry, I was jumping on to the actual. Yeah, I suppose it is somewhat paradoxical. Risk in a report dealing with risk, saying there's no risk implications. I think what that section is trying to do is just recognise that you know, having dealt with in the manner that the report does with risk, there's no particular risk implications lying beyond that. But I would have to concede on reflection, the wording there could have been improved just to maybe join up the dots a bit better. So I concede it's a point well made.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Bissett.
Yeah, thanks, convener. It's a very comprehensive report, and clearly it's been looked at and audited, and given this current climate, it's essential that we do keep things under review and adapt and change, and no doubt it will be changed again. So congratulations to those who pulled that together. I just wondered, regarding Rona's departure, who would be taking over resilience role? Would that be Mr. Duff? And would that be a national as well? Thank you.
Okay, I'll ask Chief Executive Kenneth Laurie to perhaps respond to that.
Yes, thank you, convener, and good morning, everybody. In terms of the national role, because Rona played a significant role nationally in terms of resilience, that has been taken over by colleagues within other councils, and that's been agreed through the SOLACE, which is the Chief Executive's group for Scotland. In terms of the regional role, because Rona was clearly on the East of Scotland Regional Resilience Partnership, I will be taking on that role, and indeed it is commonplace that Chief Executives do fulfil that role, and I will do so from here on in. In terms of where resilience sits within the structure, at this stage it sits within Development Services and reporting to Douglas, but that is something we are going to be reviewing and considering what fits best in the medium term, and clearly we'll come back to members in due course in relation to that.
Thank you, Kenneth. Any other questions or comments? Are we happy to agree the report?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Item 5 is our economic recovery plan update, and I'll go to Mr. Duff.
Thanks, convener, and good morning, everyone. This report picks up on reports that have been at previous executives in relation to the economic recovery post the COVID-19 situation, and it gives information on the economic impact and outcome of consultation work that's been taking place over the summer, and presents the finalised version of the recovery plan, which has been the subject of that consultation. And so we're asking that the executive notes the report that's been given as Appendix 1 on the economic impact and the outcome of the consultation, agrees the final version of the recovery plan. There are some resource implications coming from this, and so we suggest that we make an approach to Business Loans Scotland, who have £232,000 of funds held on our behalf for business loans purposes, and we're suggesting that be brought back to aid the delivery of the plan. and also that the additional consequences of it should be considered by the Council at its meeting on 30th September. To give some background to the work that's been taking place on this, about the process, how this came together over the summer, and obviously that has been against the backcloth of the impacts of COVID-19 being felt both at national and local level. And section 4 of the report gives a summary of some of the main impacts that are being witnessed as a consequence of this. We have discussed these at the executive before, but just the scale of the impacts already stark and projected to become more severe, with a consequence effect on productivity, on unemployment, on particular sectors like retail. And we're feeling it locally with the impact that has been seen on some local companies, with Alexander Dennis, Marshalls and Campbell's Prime Meat already having notified of redundancies taking place, and we do expect further redundancies to come forward. The approach we've adopted reflects the national model of 4 main themes: respond, reset, restart, recover. And the first 3 of these, the respond, reset, restart, are active, and they've been taking place over basically since COVID started, or in response to its effects. And therefore we feel now that we really focus on the recovery process and firm up on the actions we want to take forward. Some of that reflects measures that are coming forward at UK level, and the Chancellor has announced a plan for jobs, and it's important we align with that, particularly with the measures around job retention and the new Kickstart scheme that's going to be coming forward for those aged 16 to 24 at risk of unemployment. But additionally, there will be more measures expected, and I think that our Chancellor is due to make a statement later in the month, which may bring forward further measures. Scottish Government has prepared its programme for government and has again reflected a lot on the impact of COVID, with a number of schemes that have come forward, and they're summarised in para 4.5 of the report, but some significant measures which is important that we align to. And therefore, we feel that the recovery plan has to have that blended approach of taking advantage of what's coming forward at national level to deal with consequence locally, as well as having some local measures specifically to deal with the threats we are experiencing. In that context, it's worthwhile noting the announcement in the programme for government for a Grangemouth Future Industries Board. And that, I think, is helpful in noting the significance of Grangemouth to the national economy. Is the challenge it particular faces, given not just COVID, but also the impact of the move to low carbon. So we summarise here the results of the work on the consultation and the exercise that's taken place over the summer with the survey of business, some sector-specific focus groups that took place, and the community survey, which had some questions around the economic impact that took place also in recent weeks. And the results of that are summarised in section 4.9. But some, quite stark messages coming through from that survey of just the impact that is being felt amongst businesses and in the community. We had some dedicated responses from business, and they were and highlighted at the top of page 49 when it comes to the effects for retail and in the town centres, with Signet and Alandi, 2 developers in the town centre, highlighting the extent of concern they have over their interests in the town centre. And that will be something that will have to be reflected in the town centre action plan that's proposed. So after the recovery plan now finalised has a set of topics that we aim to focus on, targeting national support, developing local partnerships, and then measures on skills, communities, support, town centres, tourism and communication. and there's a set of measures under each of these headings in the second appendix to the report. So it's therefore proposed that we put these measures underway, and they'll be implemented over a period of 2 years. And so the suggestion is that we give periodic updates to the executive as we progress. There will be further consultation in how these measures are implemented, and also it's important to address the financial implications of the plan. I've said about to tap into the national measures, and obviously in that regard the work we've been doing on the investment will hopefully be helpful. £90 million targeted through that support, and it's therefore vital that we align that with the rest of the recovery measures. Highlighted the Business Loan Scotland opportunity, where new funding has been granted to Business Loan Scotland for the operation of a nationwide scheme, and that means that the funds that are being held by that company on our behalf would be able, suggesting therefore that 230,000 of funds should be withdrawn and directed towards this recovery process. We've also flagged up that in the course of preparing the update to the budget in September, there would be some specific measures that would need support to be delivered to the investment zone, support for business, employability support and town centres, and we've considered that that's something that the Council may want to look at further at the budget meeting in September. We highlight at the tail end of the report measures concerning risk. That ties in with the previous item, in particular the potential of a second wave, or also the effects that Brexit may have for our economy, and therefore these are things that we'll need to have attendance to over the course of implementing the plan. And sustainability, perhaps worth mentioning that the whole point about building back better and aiming for a green recovery, and several of the measures are targeted towards achieving that type of support. So in conclusion, clearly significant concern about the impact that COVID is having on the area's economy. Important that we have a response that blends the effort nationally as well as what we can do locally. And we feel now we have to get on with this, and we would give further updates to the executive as it proceeds. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Douglas. Councillor Alexander.
Yes, thanks very much to Douglas for a very, very comprehensive report. He's not left me with much, but other than to re-emphasise the importance of this plan, the recovery plan. Of course, we're still in the grip of this particular pandemic. We don't know exactly when we'll be out of that particular grasp, but it's important that we begin now to try to remedy some of the negative aspects of the process, which has cost our local economy a considerable amount of money. I'm particularly pleased to see the emphasis on young people. Page 47, 4.5, the Scottish Government's proposals for a guarantee of a job or training place for youngsters. It's very important that our youngsters aren't allowed to drift into the mentality of there being no hope. That there be always opportunities for the brighter kids, but for all kids, they need to make sure that they're not allowed to drift into life of crime or drugs or whatever, just through a lack of the discipline that employment brings. So I'm particularly pleased to see the Youth Guarantee Scheme. Perhaps the most significant, I think the most telling of the bullet points here is the 2.75 million that's been made available for regeneration works, and it's something that obviously is a national priority. We have to match that ambition. We need to make sure that when the grants are being given out, we have got ambitious programmes before them, because 275 million is a fair amount of money. A per capita share of that would be about £7 million, if I'm right, Brian. You correct me if I'm wrong. But about 3% of the total, so about £7 million. That's per capita. This is going to be a bidding process, so we've got to make sure that our bids are suitably ambitious. Obviously, more will get said about that as we go on, and particularly as towards the 30th of this month, and the full council meeting that's there at that particular point in time. The other aspects of the report that are there, I think, are self-explanatory, and I think to the council credit, providing we match the ambition of officers to improve the environment, and it's a hell of a task that they've got before them. But if any group of individuals can come forward with the proposals that will make an impact, then it's our economic development staff. And that's something that we can all be proud of. So with that, convener, I formally move the recommendations contained on page 45 at 2.1, 2.1a through to 2.1d.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander, and I agree entirely. We have a good, robust recovery plan here, and it provides an overview of a wide-ranging impact that COVID has had on the local economy and the particular risks around employment. But we've not yet fully felt the impact as yet. Things have not bottomed out, and there's all the impacts of Brexit that are about to hit us. There are, however, certain sections of the population, as you've highlighted, that are disproportionately affected, particularly young people, lone parents, and those who have been in long-term employment and now find themselves not in the best possible position to re-enter the work of job search. I think it's important to highlight that our employment training unit have been working throughout COVID to support their client base online, keeping them engaged and do all the certificated work so that they can still continue to progress and be in the best possible position to secure placements once the restrictions are lifted. And I know that they've been working hard to identify placements right across the public and private sector as well, and in preparation for moving those on. I think it's important as a council, we need to look at doing our bit and making sure that we give opportunities for some of those, particularly the young people, to gain experience within a local government setting that can then give them these transferable skills and going forward. There's a number of funding streams targeted at getting people across the board back to work, and particularly those that are most detached, and those are very welcome, and we need to make sure that we maximise the use of those. I'm going to float an idea to see if there's any feedback about having perhaps a seminar for members, or a briefing for members, just exactly on the work of ETU and actually what they are going to look to be delivering, so that we can be aware and be able to support our constituents, as undoubtedly people will come when they find themselves having difficulty or unemployed. Also help to maybe give an idea of the magnitude of the task that we have before us, particularly around that sector, and that will maybe help also to quantify what's required when we actually come to resourcing our recovery plan going forward. Also wanted to just highlight that we're not doing this in isolation. As a council, the Economic Partnership are supporting all of this work, and that is again across the public and the private sector. That we cannot solely affect the recovery, and it needs the support of that wider business sector, and they need to work collaboratively, and that's something that's very, very positive with our economic partnership, and they're quite enthused about going into this new phase, and the thoughts of building back better and that sustainability. So I'm more than happy to second this report, and look forward to the challenges that will no doubt come from this as we go forward, but recognising that we need to work collaboratively across our business sector, as well as in the employment sector, to maximise the opportunities for our local people. I'll now open that up for any questions or comments from members. Oh, Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Convener. I'll just ask Duff on 4.6 on page 47. This highlights there are a significant number of measures and funding available nationally. Is that the funding? Have we applied for this yet? Is that the funding you spoke about and Councillor Alexander spoke about, or is these additional funding?
Douglas.
It's a funding, councillor. So these are new. Obviously, some measures are active presently. So things like furloughing and so on. These are measures that are active at the present time. But the Kickstart scheme is really just starting up, and we've been asked to give an expression of interest for that. We're doing some work with our colleagues in Forth Valley around that at the present time. The measures that are coming forward through Scottish Government, some of these are just getting going, so we would need to position ourselves to avail ourselves of that support. And it's unclear at the present time for some of these funds exactly how that money will be put forward. The likelihood is that we'll need to prepare bids and demonstrate our match funding, demonstrate how it would bed into the other support that we have in place. So that's where there will be considerable effort needed to draw this together.
Thank you, Mr. Duff.
Thanks, Convener. Just a couple of questions. If you look at 7.1, I'm just wondering what additional adverse consequences are we anticipating and planning for in the future? There's obviously going to be a significant impact with Brexit, and we already know partly what the impact of COVID is at the moment, but I'm just wondering in the long term. I'd be quite happy for a briefing session or a seminar, Convener. I think the more information we have, the better. The other thing, we've been asked to agree additional resources, but there's no figure being put to that. There's supposed to be a report going to the full council on the 30th of this month. I'm just wondering if we can get a figure attached to this. Thanks.
Douglas, you want to respond to that, please?
Yeah. In terms of the further adverse consequences, you know, clearly there can be lots of speculation and scenario planning around that. So there's obviously steps taking place at the national level. The mention of the Office for Budget Responsibility suggesting that unemployment could increase to 3.5 million next year. I think the potential scale of this is as bad as anything that was experienced in the 80s and 90s during those significant recessions and downturns. You know, and I think there's a potential structural shift in the way that the labour market works here. It could be headed off, it could return, but I think there are real risks that we're seeing here and concerns that it could be what we're facing. And therefore, I think to have some focus, particularly on unemployment, because that is going to have an effect for our communities, does make real sense. And the lessons that were learnt in the 80s and 90s and so on is that it's important to keep people working and give them the opportunity to progress and build up their capabilities. And that very much is the approach that we've adopted in this plan. So we're building on the experience that ATU have of progressing people along a 5-stage skills pipeline with support targeted at each stage. And I think that's very much going to be the approach we would look to bolster through the next set of steps we take.
Douglas, do we have a figure for the additional resources?
Sorry, in terms of the additional resources, we're working with Brian just now, and that we intend to have something in the plan that will come forward to the council in September on that. So obviously we're having to have regard to the national announcements. This potential that we can draw in the Business Loans Fund is quite helpful, and then tailor the level of support according to the measures that we're here. So there will be some numbers in the report coming forward to the council at the end of the month.
Thanks, Douglas.
Okay, thank you. Nigel?
Thanks, convener. Can I just turn to page 74 of the where in the list of the various economic recovery plans, Appendix 2. I'm just wondering why under item 3, which talks about the progress of the investment zone, why are we looking for additional resources for a business case and project management, and why has that not been funded from within the £90 million envelope for which we have been granted a UK and Scottish Government grant?
Douglas?
We'll try, but very much the order of these things in the past has been that partners work up their business cases locally and present them to government to draw down the funds at a later point, and therefore that they be part of the work. We've been at pains to mention that our deal's different, that our deal is about not just the needs of our communities, but also about the change that's taken effect at Grangemouth, and therefore there is a national need, a national priority there, and that's where we ask for government support and through national bodies like Scottish Enterprise and so on to draw that together. We're very close, so we have got a good order of work done, and therefore this is really looking at some additional support that will help to get that up and running. In time, we will need some dedicated support to deliver the projects, to work up the projects in more detail and to get them delivered. And therefore, that's some of the additional support that we need and resource requirement.
Thanks for that, but I still don't understand why that isn't factored in to the cost of these projects. I mean, it doesn't seem to make sense to me.
It's the gap between getting approval and then the money starts to flow. And so this is to get to the approval stage, get it signed off. And once we're in there, the money will start to flow, and there is the capacity to draw down support at that point. That will still need to be negotiated because the government does expect that a level of effort and resource will be applied by partners locally to get to that stage. And that's what very much in the course of discussing that with them just now.
Okay, I'm beginning to get the picture, but
it basically means we won't be able to draw down any money until we've got it fully approved. And to get to that point needs some resource to get there.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, thanks, Douglas.
Thanks, Nigel. That's no different to other growth deals in that respect. Okay, I've got Councillor Bissett and then I've got Councillor Reid.
Hi, thanks, convener. I think this pandemic has certainly devastated businesses across Scotland and across the whole of the UK. And we need to try and give as much support as we can to businesses to try and help them recover. It's important that we engage with businesses, as many people as possible in the local community as well, to try and find a way forward. And I do agree with the sentiments that we need to try and focus on the youth and make sure that they don't slip through the net, and that we provide them a platform to go forward. And I welcome that for the Scottish Government, the programme where we can, with the youth employment programme. And so I was glad to see in the report that we're going to try and give interest-free grants or loans to small and medium businesses. I think that's important, and I know Councillor Black, who has been asking about that many times, and to support small businesses. So I think that it's a good report. There's a lot in it, and no doubt it's an emerging report, and it will evolve, and it will need to be adapted as time goes on. So very supportive of it, and we'll look forward to seeing what finances are required at the full council. Clearly, finances are a big across the council. There's a lot of demand across a lot of departments for it's competing for resources, so we'll have to wait and see what comes forward. And I guess we'll have to bid for these projects that have come forward for the Scottish Government, and we'll look forward to the bids go in and seeing what funding we can get. But I think it's a good report, and it provides the bones of progress and recovery. So we in the Labour Group certainly support that report, and look forward to it being implemented, and look forward to the iterations of it, and any changes and briefings that come forward. We'll look forward to them as well. So just to send a message out to the businesses locally that we're fully supportive, and particularly small and medium businesses, and to the youth that we're trying to support. And certainly they're just at the first stages of trying to get on employment ladder. We want to support them as much as possible. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Bissett. Councillor Reid.
Just to basically reiterate what Robert has just said, Alison and I have met with officers on several occasions in the last few months, and I'd like to thank Douglas and all the teams within Development Services in particular for their help in that regard. Many of the things we discussed are incorporated in the report, and it is important to be collaborative at this time. This is World War III, and it's a wee bug we're battling with at the moment. As far as the town centres are concerned, and I use the word plural, town centres, I think what's happening is just an acceleration of what was going to happen. In any case, the decline has just been accelerated. And it's good to see our attention's turning to the small and medium businesses, who I think in time will take up the space occupied by the large national and international retail. I take it retail will shrink. I noticed the reference to Elandai with the Highgate. It doesn't say they're closing, it says they're repurposing, which I suspect may be a move from retail to something else. And it's possibly a direction in which we should head as well. But thanks to the staff for this report. And in terms of collaboration, I think where we've attempted to put forward points, that's been reciprocated by the administration, and it's the way to go about things at this time of crisis. So, thanks to everyone concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. I think you're absolutely right that Elandai are looking at different types of activities beyond retail within the Howgate, as they recognise that is going to be more of the draw, and it's going to be different types of activities that people are going to want from their town centres, as we've discussed on a number of occasions before. And it'll be interesting to have further discussions when we have a bit of clarity from what we are doing ourselves with them on how we can work with them on that. Okay, is there anyone else before I'll bring in Councillor Alexander just to sum up?
Just to welcome the comments of both Councillor Reid and also Councillor Bissett. It's important that we do work together for the good of Falkirk Town Centre, Grangemouth Town Centre, Bowness, Stennismuir, and all of the other district centres. But Falkirk Centre is probably the one that has deteriorated most in the last few years, given the loss of all the major units that we have lost. In terms of diversification, and Councillor Reid is absolutely spot on. We need to diversify away from retail. Retail still have its position within the town centre, but what we want is a civic centre where we can attract different footfall from what we have just now in the town centre. We want to see more houses in the town centre, particularly properties above shops, and we're starting to see applications come trickling in for those. We want to see student accommodation, and the talks that are ongoing at the moment with providers may benefit the district in the long run. We bring about that type of change that we're looking for, and we've just got to work towards it. There'll be bumps along the road, and that's inevitable. But I think if we work together, then we will deliver the type of vision that Councillor Reid has outlined.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Alexander. I'm mindful that we've talked a wee bit about Falkirk Town Centre, but the Economic Recovery Plan is much broader than that, and it has many facets, as does our communities across, and it will need to seek to accommodate all of that, which is no mean feat. And I have to, like everyone else, commend the officers that have worked on this plan, and certainly the input of our partners to it as well. Therefore, can I ask for members are we agreed on the report recommendations? Agreed. Right, thank you for that. We move on to our strategic property review draft implementation plan, and I think it's Mr. Duff again. Yeah.
Is it no procurement next?
You've missed it, nearly 100 pages of the agenda, Cecil.
I beg your pardon, you're absolutely right. It's working with too many bits of paper this morning. When we're on, but we do have the procurement strategy. Apologies for that. And is it Mr. Ritchie? Are you taking the procurement strategy?
Yeah, thanks. Convener, good morning to all members. This report covers 3 matters, hence the number of pages covered on the agenda. The report covers the 2019 annual procurement report, a review of the current procurement strategy, which started back in 2017 and takes us through to the current financial year, and a forward look at a new policy which will take our procurement strategy out to 2023. The key outcomes from the 2019-2020 procurement report are set out in section 4.1 of the report, and I think shows good progress. The information shown in Appendix 1, I think, presents a good pictorial view of our progress in 2019-20. The new strategy starts with a look back at what we have delivered between 2017 and now, and details of those outcomes are set out in section 5.3 of the report. Coming to the new policy itself, section 5.7 sets out the 5 pillars of our procurement strategy moving forward. Our strategy was supported by 30 improvement actions with 20 PIs, just checking the delivery of that strategy over time. New strategy is obviously launched at time of COVID. The work of the procurement team in the response stage of COVID is shown at the start of paragraph 6 of the report. The latter sections in paragraph 6 show the important linkage of the procurement strategy with both the National Economic Plan as well as the Council's own Economic Development Plan discussed in the last item. The work of the procurement strategy importantly includes ensuring local businesses are tender ready for work not only with Falkirk Council but with other councils. Just thinking about the work that lies ahead for our own council, we've got significant works on capital programmes, on TIF, on the investment zone and through community choices. So convener, there's a lot of work going on. I think the timing of the launch of our new strategy and our new focus is good. And with that, I'll hand back to committee and ask members if they've got any questions. Thank you, convener.
Thank you, Stuart. Unfortunately, Councillor Bowes got called away in business early this morning, and he would have been here to speak to the report. However, he did give me a statement and just asked if I would read it out on his behalf, which I'm happy to do. Firstly, the procurement team have played a significant role in support of the health and care team during the pandemic. It's often forgotten that the backroom support and quick actions of the procurement team puts critical services and supplies in the hands of the front line. You've had a critical role, and I ask Stuart and David to take my personal thanks on behalf of Councillor Bowes back to your team. Falkirk's procurement team is perceived by Scotland Excel as one of the best teams in Scotland. That's particularly relevant with regards to local spend. There is evidence to this when compared to other Scottish local authorities. Falkirk is the eighth largest percentage spend on local companies, with the following being above us, being Highland, the 3 island councils, for obvious reasons of geography, then Glasgow, Edinburgh and Dundee, reasons of where big business have chosen to locate. The current rising star in Scotland for local procurement is North Ayrshire, and they spend 19% in comparison to Falkirk's 34% on local companies. The report shows that we've improved our situation from what is already a respectable level, but we can still continue to improve, and recent actions will assist with this. The recent changes to purchasing level of quick quotes will make larger projects more attainable to smaller companies for whom the full procurement paperwork was a barrier. Falkirk's procurement department has a core role in supplier development programme in the support of all businesses to successfully obtain business from Public Contracts Scotland. This is done through education seminars, which have been held virtually, and attending and presenting at Meet the Buyer events. These allow companies to overcome the barriers they perceive and allow direct contact with people making the buying decisions. I would ask everyone to encourage every local company to register with Public Contracts Scotland as if they are interested in supplying Falkirk Council. They then complete the ESPD document, which is then used to buyers to determine the tender list. It's free to use and an incredible resource which is admired throughout the UK. Yes, we can improve. Of course we can, and procurement has been seen recently as working closely with all departments and development services in particular to do just that. Simplification of the procurement process has to continue, but we also have to keep an eye on the quality of the procurement. I welcome the increase in local spend and £500,000 savings and commend the report to the Emergency Executive. I'm therefore happy to move the report on the Executive papers today as the convener. Okay, Councillor Gardner.
Happy to second, just reserving the right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up to any members' questions or comments. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, convener. Maybe we could have more of these type of reports, because I must admit it's one of the best reports that I've read in a while. It was succinct and concise and technically fairly easy to read, straightforward, all the information you need, and the graphic was simple graphic that gave you information that just made you understand what's going on. I would like to give thanks to the procurement team for their achievements. I think we'll move forward. This report does list everything, and certainly we're going to try and make it easier for people to get through the bureaucracy of the council and try and make things a bit easier for them to tender. I was glad to see that over the period of this procurement policy, it will save, I believe it says in the report, 1.6 million, and 43 placements, 39 apprenticeships and 16 new jobs, which is always welcome. And also within the report, there's environmental influencers for companies that are bidding that they would comply with our environmental policies. So I'm glad to see that, because climate change is probably the top issue these days. So welcome the report. It's a fantastic report, and congratulations to the team. And hopefully we'll get many more. It's as simple and straightforward as that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bissett. Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, convener. First of all, can I just ask a question just for Mr. Moody to clarify? Can a convener actually move a report in his absence by putting it in writing? Could he possibly clarify that for us?
Mr. Moody's on the phones. He's joining us on the phone, sorry.
Right.
He's just getting himself ready to respond.
I do have another question as well, convener. I might as well just ask that just now, I suppose.
Okay, just go for it.
My other question relates to Scotland Excel. It was mentioned earlier on in the presentation. Obviously, there's going to be an impact on them and the services that they provide to councils. Do we have an annual figure for Falkirk Council, what they actually spend in relation to Scotland Excel? And what do we anticipate the impact in the future? What is that going to be? Thanks.
Okay, I'll bring in Mr. Moody first, and then I'll come back to Mr. Ritchie.
Yes, thank you, convener. The two roles here are those of the portfolio holder and those of members of the emergency executive itself. And as the convener advised, the portfolio holder was unable to attend at short notice. So I think all that was done there was simply to read a short statement on his behalf. The actual moving of the recommendations was done by the convener of the committee herself and seconded by Councillor Garner, so that's all procedurally in order.
Colin, that wasn't very clear as to how it was originally put forward, because the convener read out the statement saying that the convener was actually moving the report.
And that is correct. I was moving the report as the convener of this committee. I did read out Councillor Bows's statement and then moved the report as the convener of this committee.
And that's the normal process whereby the portfolio holder has an opportunity to say something but can't formally move the recommendations because they're not a member of the committee. So it was therefore the convener of the committee who moved the recommendations.
Thanks for the clarification, Colin.
Mr. Ritchie, are you able to give anything around Scotland Excel?
Yeah, thanks, convener. We spend about £100,000 with Scotland Excel, and there's a table in the report itself. There's a table at 7.3 in the procurement strategy that indicates that we've got about just over £58 million worth of contracts through participation in Scotland Excel.
Thank you, Stuart.
Okay, Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, convener. As already stated in previous agenda items, there is challenges going forward, not just for this council, but for the other 31 councils. But there is, we hope, going to be lots of opportunities, already stated in the TIF and all the other aspects of our plan going forward. So there is a bright side to this report as well, even though there is a cautious approach as well, Convener. The 8th, we're sitting 8th in the league, which is, you can always try and get better and get up that ladder. The investment for Grangemouth as a national significance will help Falkirk Council. Can I just ask one question though, Convener, where we're saying meet the buyers in these happen, because I've got a lot of small businesses who have never had the opportunity. Maybe they didn't realise that they're taking place. So can we get an update when these happen and when they will happen? Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. I think that there's not been one very recently, obviously, because of the situation we're in. But maybe Douglas will be able to tell us a wee bit more about the Meet the Buyer events and how often they're held.
Thank you, Convener. Obviously, we work very closely with Stuart and his team on the work relating to procurement and promoting its benefits for the local economy. Meet the Buyers normally annual. There's a big annual event takes place, and it involves supplier development programme, Scotland Excel, a whole range of organisations, and at that time there's a lot of publicity takes place around it. I think this year, for the first time, there was a new northern version of the Meet the Buyer event, and that took place quite recently and was done virtually. It was done online, so that was an innovation that came through and apparently went quite successfully. So, and whenever these events take place, we make sure to get a lot of messaging out around it. When we use our Business Falkirk website and the social media to make sure that people are aware of it. When it comes to local companies, I really would reinforce the value, as mentioned, of the services that are there, particularly supplier development programme. Companies really should get the right training to prepare themselves for accessing this, and there's terrific resources online through that a company that allows that to take place. So really encourage people to be directed towards that support.
Okay, James, are you happy with that?
Yes, Convener, yes. And when there is one going forward, a lot of businesses find it hard to get on the procurement ladder. Don't know if it's because of the inexperience that they've got, but hopefully going forward that we can help them. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reid.
Sorry, Convener, I think the point has already been made. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Any other member? Are we happy to accept the report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Do move this time to the strategic property review and the draft implementation plan. And Douglas, are you going to take? Yeah. Okay, I'll hand over to Douglas.
Happy to come in this time, convener. So this report gives a further update on the work relating to the strategic property review, and gives recommendations on the actions to finalise the implementation plan that would go with the review, and to progress the various projects and proposals that it contains. We're asking that we approve the draft of the implementation plan as a basis for community engagement to take place. We create a task group to take forward the work relating to the future learning and community estate, and aligning that with the enabled communities work under the Council of the Future. And that further reports come forward on the measures arising from the work of that group, and also relating to our work on the corporate landlord model for asset management. And coming from that final draft of the strategy and the implementation plan to come forward to a future meeting of the executive. The background to this members will be familiar with. There's been a number of workshops taking place with members participating at both ward and locality level. The SPR, as we know, relates to the condition of the council's property estate, whereby we have really too many properties and too many of them in inadequate condition for our service requirements, and therefore we need to modernise its provision aligned with the work that we're doing to modernise the council's services. The plan suggests that this work be organised in 3 work streams, one on the learning estate and community-based services, specialist assets, and the corporate landlord model, and the final one relating to the offices and the HQ project. And within each of these, we suggest that there would be 4 themes of work taken forward. One, to transform the way that we manage our properties and use them to meet community needs, with potentially quite significant investment in transforming those assets to meet our requirements. Another, to sustain the properties, and part of the message is that we presently don't do enough to maintain our properties, and that we need to get into the process of having a normal life cycle process of replacement and upgrade to our properties. And some new delivery models that can come forward, and suggestions around community asset transfer, working in partnership with various organisations to help manage our assets in the future, and also to rationalise or dispose of assets. And in doing that, that can aid the delivery of the rest of the programme, as well as generating investment on the sites that we or properties we would look to dispose of. We would capture the result from the workshops in section 4 of the report, and some of the key findings from the workshops, which highlighted the importance of our community properties in relation to the work on COVID-19, and the roles of schools. We've said in the SPR that we should be focusing on schools as really the hub of community-based service activity. But that needs to reflect the demographics, the access and locational characteristics of each community. And it needs to reflect the neighbourhood's identity and their different needs. And really, I think a main message coming through this work of the value and importance of that neighbourhood level activity. Involving the community are prerequisites, and therefore important when it comes to consultation that takes place. In relation to the main considerations for the report, these relate to the main work stream. Principally the work on the learning estate and community assets. That's where a lot of the discussion took place, and issues came out in the course of discussion about how that moves forward, and aligning the plans for investment in the school estate with the needs of communities. And therefore our work on Success Today, Excel Tomorrow, which is the programme for renewal of the school estate, needs to be aligned with the Enabled Communities programme, so we have a really and fundamental of how these assets work to meet not just learning purposes, but other purposes that communities have, in care, in health and housing, etc. And so this work stream we're suggesting is taken forward through a task group, that it should align with the work on enabling communities and the community choices participatory budgeting exercise, where there are some funds in the capital programme that could support delivery of models coming through this. In addition, additionally, we do underpinning work on the capacity that communities need to adopt these new delivery models and how to work with partners in their delivery. The draft plan sets out at the locality level a number of the actions and their implications for properties, and our suggestion is that we should move to discuss these with communities in more detail and bring it back to the executive for consideration. In relation to the other work streams, we're looking to progress our work on specialist assets and bring forward proposals for investment and rationalisation there, and also to roll out the model for corporate landlord, and we're suggesting we proceed with that with another report to be given as update to the executive on that model. In relation to the office estate, there's work happening in relation to the locality and the rollout of that model, as well as on the HQ, and that will be a subject of a report to come in September. Big message through the workshops was the need to consult, and we've captured some of the main findings there from the workshops of how we go about that consultation, and we'll draw up an engagement plan for that work to take place to conclude by the end of the year. But we really see this as being the starting point for further engagement with communities as each of the projects proceeds. Important in terms of the financial implications that the plan aligns with the capital strategy and the plans. Obviously, there was the prospect at the last budget meeting of an uplift in council tax to invest in the council's property estate, and that would clearly be a matter to consider again at future budget meetings in order to renew the estate we require. We highlight the risk section the concerns that we do have over the condition of our assets. We've already seen some of the properties that are in poor condition fail in terms of some of their main services and had to close, and there is a risk of further incidents of that type. So really feel that we need to move forward with this. We need to get out and consult on this draft plan, bring it back to the executive for consideration. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Douglas. Councillor Alexander?
Yes, again, thanks very much to Douglas for a very comprehensive report. The whole issue of the management of our portfolio, our property portfolio, is one that really should have been tackled years ago. Maybe if we had done so, there wouldn't have been the scale of investment that's required in the current stock. So it's only natural that we should look to improve the situation as it relates to these properties. And like it or not, the best way to do that is to sell off the old to invest in the new. And essentially that's the purpose for this particular exercise. Now, there will be some properties that individual communities will guard with their lives, and others where there's less of an issue. But we need to get out and find out what people think, what communities think, and what communities want to participate within. I was disappointed to see the article in the Falkirk Herald this morning with regards to this particular report, because all of the community organisations that we've had dealings with in the past, Bowness is probably the one that we've had most contact with, and most explanation given as to the purpose of the thing today and the purpose of the whole strategy being developed. Indeed, we have a situation whereby Bowness has attended a number of the events that the council has organised. So all of the questions that are posed in that particular article
Okay, thank you, Councillor Alexander. And I think Jack, a copy of the addendum, if anybody would wish to see that. I know that we did have the fire alarm going off at the same time. It was a test, so that it wasn't that the building was actually burning down. I would wish to second the report. This process started back in 2016 in the previous council. It's been very challenging to make traction with it, and as a result, we're not making decisions about investment. And at the same time, we have properties that are already in a poor condition, continuing to deteriorate and are becoming more costly. We made a commitment a year ago when we went out to the first round of consultation that there would be a further more detailed round of consultation with our communities, and that's where we are now. The plan was never ever going to be perfect at this stage, and nor should it be, because it needs to have space for our communities to have input. Today, we're not being asked for any decisions to be taken with regard to facilities, and it will be up to communities to tell us what's most important to them, and from that, a short, medium, and long-term plan will be developed from that feedback. And it's very likely that the larger, more complex projects will need to be further down the line, just because of the nature of them and the development that's required to bring them together. But I would really like to hope that the outcome of all this process would enable us to see all our communities get some investment. And in the very near future, the next executive, I anticipate we will be able to bring forward a report, particularly around participatory budgeting, which will be able to actually have some cash that we committed for our communities in the budget available to them, and this will be an ideal part of this process. There's a need to take a corporate landlord approach to our buildings going forward, so that we don't end up in this particular situation again, that we then have the lifetime costs and a maintenance plan to ensure that we do invest in our buildings going forward. And that will allow all of the work streams around Success Today, Excel Tomorrow, and enable communities to really start to make a difference in our communities, and allow that place building and sense of ownership to develop going forward, because I think that's something that is really missing. So I'm happy to support the changes that Councillor Alexander's outlined, having taken on board comments from the local members that they didn't feel things were reflected well, and that will allow us to go out and have the detailed conversations with the communities, and actually then develop a plan that's bespoke for each area, and hopefully start to be able to see some investment going into some of those communities, and to be able to shed some of the very costly buildings that are at the end of their life and reinvested. I'll now open it up for members' questions and comments. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. I don't think there are any particular issues with the addendum. I have an amendment, but a couple of observations before that. I don't think Madeleine Hunt is making a political statement. I think she was being concerned for the people of Bo'ness and standing up for them, and maybe felt she was being excluded. But as Councillor Alexander said, there will be a consultation. Everybody will have the opportunity to engage at that point. I was glad to see that we're moving towards a corporate landlord approach regarding housing property asset management. I think that's a sensible thing to do, and it'll sort of pull it under all one umbrella and make it easier to manage. Yes, we do need to try and move forward with SPR. It's been going on for quite some time. So I guess we agree most of the recommendations, and it's only item 4, 2 points that I put up an amendment, which Mr. Moody said I can just read out. I can just state, I don't need to put it in writing because it's straightforward. Item 4 says that a final draft of the property strategy and implementation plan is brought to our future executive. My amendment is simply that the final draft goes to full council. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Do we have a formal seconder? Councillor Nimmo?
Convener, I'm happy to second the amendment. Can I just add to that while I'm on? Is that okay?
Yes, if you've got comments to make, yeah.
Right. Douglas mentioned the property estate. Now, there's a huge list. The truth of the matter is that we're only tackling part of the problem with this SPR. There's a huge list of commercial properties that I received just recently there, and there's a whole host of these properties lying vacant, doing nothing. Now, obviously, there's a value attached to all the commercial properties that the council have. If they're lying empty, they're not making anything for us. I'm just wondering what the proposal is to deal with the commercial side. I know, I fully appreciate that we get a large income from it. It's roughly about £4 million a year. But for a significant number of these properties to sit and lie empty, why do we still have them? Why don't we try and get rid of them and make some capital money from them? Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Douglas?
Happy to come in on that, Convener, and happy to catch up separately with Councillor Nimmo about the approach on commercial property. I know that we were trying to get a meeting arranged on that, so we'll do that after this meeting, where we more detail. But in summary, the approach to the commercial estate relates to our economic development role, and is long-standing with the council. Our occupancy rate is normally quite high, over 90% in normal course. Clearly, in downturns, it does take a bit of a hit, and there are a number of issues that can arise over the course of that, and our staff are working on that just now. We promote the property estate through normal market mechanisms, use a lot of online services and so on to make sure that people are aware of the availability. And also we try to invest in the estate to make sure that it's fit for purpose, and there are some funds in the capital programme to allow us to do that. So we do try to make the most of that estate, make sure it's fit for purpose, invest in it where it's possible to do that to meet the needs of businesses. In some cases, they are used for operational purposes, and we work with different services to make those available, sometimes at little or no cost, for their use. We also work with the voluntary sector, and there are a number of community groups and so on that use our estate where it's possible to do that. So we try to maximise the benefits of the commercial estate as far as possible, and certainly to try and make sure that income stream that's important to the council is sustained.
Thanks for that, Douglas. I mean, there's only a small number of units currently in my ward, in Ward 8, that are not used. But I noticed from the list there's a high concentration in Grangemouth. What are we doing to try and combat that? We need to get something done.
Absolutely. I mean, a number of vacant units on the retail side in Grangemouth Town Centre, so that's obviously a particular set of issues with the age and condition of those properties. And we've actually been working through the Town Centre Capital Fund. We have a grant we got from Scottish Government, whereby we are demolishing some properties along Union Road and relocating the businesses into the core of the town centre. That's been done with active engagement of those businesses and other stakeholders, other interests down in the town centre, to make sure that works smoothly for them. And I think shows what's possible to do through that kind of mechanism. We would hope in time that we'll see some plans for redevelopment of that site come forward. And that really shows the kind of model that we would be looking to promote through not just the reuse of our commercial assets, but through the property review itself. If we can divest ourselves of the assets we don't need, then we can bring in other investment to help with recovery.
And what timescales are we looking at, Douglas, for Grangemouth in particular?
It's happening now. A number of these businesses are being relocated as we speak, further to happen, and once they've all been successfully relocated, we'll be looking to get the demolition works completed. The capital funds were allocated for spend to be completed by March this year, March 20. But they have been extended through into 2021 because of the COVID situation. But certainly we are very keen to activate that as quickly as possible.
Thanks, Douglas.
I think that was the subject of a report towards the end of last year, if I remember correctly, to the Executive. Okay, Councillor just before I bring others in, I want to confirm with Councillor Alexander if you would be happy with to accept Councillor Bissett's further amendment around the report coming back to council as opposed to the executive.
I don't have a problem with that, convener. Although, yeah, I don't know why we're continually changing the roles and remits of the committees. But I don't have a problem with it personally.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy to accept that as it allows us to move things on.
Thanks, Convener.
Okay, Councillor Kerr, you wanted to come in?
Thanks, convener. As everybody stated, this is a very, very important report. Very important strategy for the council going forward. And Councillor Alexander was right when he says we've let these buildings fall by the wayside over the years, and this council has been left to try and fix it. That's in the past and something that we need to try and get better in the future. Some in my group, their thoughts are shared in this report, and they're sceptical of the community getting the right opportunity to bring their points across, where if we're only going to specific groups, all the people in the area maybe not be represented on them. So I would have quite happy for it to go to the full council on the 30th, but if it's to get, and I know this is only a consultative, I understand that, but there are people in my group who are very vocal about not getting their views put in this report. So I just hope that when it does come back, that all the views of the communities, because some of these proposals will work in some areas, but they will only work in other areas, and we need to take cognizance of that, convener. And I hope that when it comes back, that the views of all the community are taken into consideration. Thank you, convener.
Thank you, James. I think as elected members, I think part of our role is to encourage all our community to become involved in the consultation, so that they make their voices heard, and not necessarily the traditional organisations that we would engage with. We would encourage others to come forward, and indeed individuals and individual groupings, so they get a broad range of views in relation to that. I think, and that's something that we have to help facilitate and encourage going forward. But I think it is about getting this moving, getting to the next stage, and hearing what our communities are saying. And I think from that we'll certainly see that it's not going to be a case of one size fits all, because there's different demographics across our communities. If you take the villages, for example, whether it's up the Braes, or Bowness, Blackness, or across in Larbert Stennismuir area, the smaller villages there, they have different needs from the larger centres of population, and that will need to be taken into account. Sorry, Councillor.
Thank you, convener. Just to touch on James's point there, all our areas are represented on this committee by our group members coming to us when they see agenda items, and we take forward any of their issues through that role. So I don't think areas are left out at all, because we do speak to our members in the SNP administration group, and we do take into account what they're saying. We also heard what they're saying at the Cality planning meetings, etc. So yeah, they are taken into account. No one can deny we need an SBR. And in my opinion, this is long overdue, as many have said as well. This isn't about the closures, it's about what the council can do, and more importantly, what our communities want and need. We need the models which fit all localities, which James referred to as well, and to move forward with this, we need the community engagement. I'm happy to see their support going forward, and I'm also happy to see it going to full council if that's what's so desired.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. Is there anyone else? Councillor Colley?
I'll be brief. I mean, I think I just want to echo what Councillor Garner said. This has been rumbling on for years, well before a good number of us were even on the council without a resolution, and crucially the investment in our communities. It feels like we're a bit nearer to having real meaningful conversations with our communities around this, rather than the annual raising of anxiety by not making decisions and not articulating a vision for investment. So I think this can, whilst I do understand that it does cause anxiety, and I think all of us as councillors are very mindful of our responsibilities in trying to put forward the views of our communities. We very much need, as wide as possible, as you said, convener, the widest possible groups within our communities to be involved in this consultation. So I think this is a positive move forward.
Thank you. If there's no other members, oh, sorry, Councillor Reid.
Yes, I won't be long either, convener. It's just a question on 5.7. That's the bit about community choices. I think everybody will be grateful that the participatory budgeting is about to disappear from the vocabulary. And you and I were present at a very good PDP last week, where we got an excellent report from officers. But the last sentence, in this respect, the alignment with the Council's capital programme process will be important. Suppose a community came forward with something that wasn't in our capital programme, how would that be dealt with?
I think what it means is that the investment that is going to be available as part of our capital programme, the allowance. But I'll ask perhaps Mr. Ritchie if you can maybe clarify on that.
You're correct in what you say, convener.
Right, thank you.
So
it's just the allocation.
So this would be a heading in our capital programme would be community choices. Yeah. It'd be a generic thing. Yeah. Right. Okay. Fine. I think on the point of community involvement, I think the community asset transfer serves as an example. I know in Tamford Hill, they've probably done more in 6 months than the council's done in the last 10 years. And I think the same is true of my old stamping ground in Westfield. There's been a real release of pent-up energy in the part of the community. And I think we'll see that reflected once this is implemented, convener.
I think you will be right, Pat. Douglas, you wanted to come in?
It was probably just to add to that point that there is going to be the opportunity through this consultation that if communities have got good ideas that they want to bring to us, the community choices as a primer for that, but actually put something that is more fundamental for support through the capital programme, this is the opportunity to do that. You know, so it can work both ways in that sense, that we've got our ideas through the capital programme, but this is the dialogue here can give communities the chance to feed in their ideas.
Okay, that's helpful, Douglas. Okay, if there's no other member, Councillor Alexander, do you have any final comments?
Just one point to clarifying. Council actually has a programme and a policy now for the sale of commercial premises, the ring fencing and reinvestment of the capital receipts into that whole agenda. So you know, we have looked at that. It's something that technically is still there, but we need to you know, dust down and polish up for the future. But the fact that it's there, and the fact that we've got examples, good positive examples of where companies have bought over the premises they were in, and it's improved the pension schemes, for example. So that's something to be welcome. But again, that's something that can be taken out, dusted down, and polished up for a Mark II.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Alexander. Are we therefore agree the report with the various amendments?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, thank you very much, colleagues. The next item is the Tax Incremental Finance Initiative. And again, I think we're going back to Douglas.
Thanks, Convener. I'll try to be brief in regard to this one, but there are some complexities to it I'll need to take you through. It's an update in regard to the Tax Incremental Finance Initiative and the proposed revisions to the programme with the implementation plan for the projects that we propose to take forward in the TIF. So we seek agreement for the revised implementation schedule. It's attached as Appendix 1. We're looking to extend the payback period for the TIF from 25 to 26 years to reflect changes in non-domestic rates policy government, to progress relating to the M9 corridor, including the work on the A904 and the Westfield roundabout at a cost of £62.5 million that is funded from the TIF, and to progress discussions with the Scottish Government and the Futures Trust on an increase to the capital expenditure budget within the TIF to £95.7 million. So clearly important in terms of the scale of activity that's coming forward here, and it's a key priority of the Council's economic strategy of the recovery work that we're doing, and has been developed over a number of years through formal agreement with the Scottish Government. TIF, in essence, is quite a simple concept, but in delivery has proven to be quite complicated. So the simple terms, it's about the provision of infrastructure to overcome constraints to development. And the idea is that we build the infrastructure to enable development on about 30 different red line sites. And within those red lines, the rates that come from that development repays the cost of the infrastructure. And for us, it's quite a comprehensive package. We have a set of infrastructure works to deliver. And as I say, we have about 30 sites that we receive the non-domestic rates from to meet the cost of that infrastructure. It's been going from 2013, and we've spent £9.4 million on works already. And that has helped with the square metres of commercial floor space that pays the rates, and has helped to pay to create around 1,400 jobs. The works that we're doing, though, are complex and involve having to overcome a number of constraints that relate to utilities, ground conditions, ownerships, etc. And that has had a cause of slippage in some of the delivery of some of the projects. And therefore, we've had to adjust the programme, and we bring this report to you each year just to give you an update on those adjustments. We're looking now to make adjustments for the M9 corridor works, which has the work on the main Falkirk Grangemouth access, the A904, with the Westfield roundabout and the junction with the A9. Carriageway, and create a new crossing at the Westfield roundabout with a pedestrian and cycle bridge. We've done quite intensive option appraisal on that work, and we consider that that's the best way forward for that project. We've attracted about 2.4 million of European funds to help deliver that project, and we're now keen to proceed and get it underway. We also have work at the M9 Junction 5 to upgrade that junction and its connections through and along past Bean Cross and Grand Sable. and also to upgrade the Icehouse Brae, which will help with some of the heavy goods traffic arising from the. We also have work proposed at the Avon Gorge, and we're doing a joint scheme there with Scottish Government and West Lothian Council. The issue has been the commitment of funds from those other parties, and whilst we have had funds in the TIF, we rely on those funds coming forward from the other participants to enable that project to proceed. But the cost of contribution has increased over that time to 12.9 million. In relation to the Grangemouth Flood Protection Scheme, that's a major project likely to cost in excess of 220 million, a #1 national priority in flood prevention terms for the government. And we're expected to find a 20% contribution towards delivery of that scheme over its lifetime. We sought 12.7 of that to come from the TIF, and we would look to other local sources to support it. And so that would be an important contributor to the development taking place at Grangemouth. There's also a package for site enabling works, and the spend to date on that being 2.7 million. We're looking to have a budget of 5 million for that, which would be augmented through the ERDF, or would be contributed to by the ERDF support of 2.4 million. So we're looking to take each of these projects forward, and the implementation plan tries to deal with the scheduling of those works. In the course of preparing this, we've had to confront two issues, one relating to the variation to the infrastructure programme and the effect of the Barclay review of non-domestic rates, which gives a rates holiday for new development in its first year. And that has meant that we'll be able to take the first year's non-domestic rates receipts. So we've asked the government to extend the period of a year to the TIF programme to allow us to recoup those monies. And they're comfortable with that. We've also asked that we should be allowed to vary the TIF budget and increase the spend on capital projects from 67 million to 95.7 million to take account of the additional constraints that we've had to encounter in delivering the projects. That's obviously subject to the Scottish Government agreeing to it, and would be met from the 141 million of non-domestic rates income that is anticipated over the period of the TIF. And we're still in discussions with Scottish Government about that. They're content that we would proceed to spend up to the 67 million, but the remainder of the 95.7 million they want to consider further, and obviously their minds are on many other things at the present time with COVID, etc. That they will be coming back to this and hope to have a decision by the end of the year. So therefore, we're asking that we would proceed with the works on the A904 and Westfield roundabout, and then we'll have further discussions with government about the contributions to the other projects. By proceeding, that allows a shovel-ready project. We're basically ready to get work underway with the contractor to seek planning, etc., consent, so that we can get that project underway in short order. And if that takes place, we estimate over the lifetime of that project around 540 construction jobs would be involved. And so, as I say, we're looking to make that adjustment to the TIF programme, and we would continue the discussions with Scottish Government to see the increase in expenditure approved, hopefully by the end of the calendar year. So that would mean a formal adjustment to the TIF agreement, and we are in discussion with Government and the Scottish Futures Trust about making those formal terms amended in the agreement. So we're asking to approve that we would proceed with that work and make the relevant adjustment to the implementation plan. Happy to take any questions, Convener.
Thank you, Douglas. Councillor Alexander.
Yes, yeah, you know, again, it's another good report. The TIF project has delivered, you know, a fair benefit to the district to date, and it makes sense to try to go back and to extend the benefits to date. And you know, when we look at the proposals for the Westfield roundabout, for example, the traffic flow, the difference in traffic flow that would bring about would be quite significant. And you know, when companies look at the locality for perhaps locating their businesses here, they look at infrastructure. They look at the quality of the roads. They look at the quality of and design of the roads, as well as the quality of them. They look at the availability and access to and from the motorway network. They look at the issues of educational opportunities, and we have the college down there. They look at the leisure opportunities, and we have Falkirk Stadium with all the benefits that brings. So the extension to the budget would be, I think, well met. And I would certainly hope that colleagues in Edinburgh will recognise this. We'll certainly be lobbying to make sure that they're aware of the purpose of it, and aware of the fact that you know, we still have issues relating to infrastructure works around about the Queensland area in particular. So the TIF itself is certainly welcome the proposed changes. Anything that can provide additional resources and additional investment at this time, when you know, we really look to produce the schemes that will have high capital expenditure, because that is the way to deal with the financial situation we find ourselves in just now, with the not just COBRA, but as we've heard, the European funding and that's forever. So we want to make sure that we can take advantage of that for the people that they represent, and so therefore that's firmly move the paper as outlined and move the recommendations within it.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Well, obviously the realignment and the reprofiling of the TIF has had to be done because of the increased costs, and we recognise that the increased costs are coming in multiple ways, and one being ground conditions, as well as the impact of COVID and just increasing costs. The whole project, though, does sit very well with our economic recovery plan, and you know, it then seeks to create the jobs, giving opportunities, particularly for local people, and gives that enabling infrastructure that enables additional private and other investment to then come, and that's what the whole TIF was set up to do. And if we actually look at specific projects, particularly around Westfield and the opportunities that it's going to create, it sits very well. And having, as Karen said, external funding that we've been able to get from Europe onto a shovel-ready project, we need to be able to take advantage of that, as that opportunity is not going to be there for us in the future. I think it's a very positive message within the TIF, despite the fact that we still need to have some discussions with our colleagues in Edinburgh, and I'm sure that we have some persuasive ways of showing them exactly the benefits, particularly as we have got our growth deal, and in order for the growth deal aspects to have a real effect, the infrastructure elsewhere needs to work as well. So I think it's a good case that we'll be able to make. Appreciate that government's distracted with dealing with other more important things just now, but in the meantime we've got an opportunity to get on with something locally that will give a bit of confidence and a bit of boost to the local area, and I'm really pleased that we're able to get such a positive report coming forward, and I'm happy to second that report. And I will now open it up to members for questions and comments. Councillor Harris.
Thanks, Convener. Just on a matter of clarification, page 197, the M9 corridor works, and looking at bullet point 1, it talks about a 2.4 million funding have been successful in attracting the 2.4 million. I presume this is in relation to the Whirley Bridge, since it's to do with low carbon transport and bicycle ways. But then under the site enabling works, it suggests that there's another 2.4 from the ERDF. And it says this is subject to receipt of this grant. So is this two different pots of 2.4 million, or is it the same 2.4 million? And if it's the same 2.4 million, can you clarify? Because on page 197, it suggests we've received it. In page 198, it says we're hoping to receive it, or that's the way I read it.
Yeah, thanks, Convener, and thanks, Councillor Harris. It's maybe not dealt with that sufficiently clearly in the report. So the 2.4 million is ERDF, European Regional Development Funds, and it's come through the Carbon Travel and Transport Fund, and is a contribution that's planned to be made to the construction of the bridge. Our budget presently has the monies earmarked for the bridge, but if that money comes in and we proceed with the project, it allows that money that we've allocated in the budget to be put to the site enabling works, bringing it up. So we've got 2.6 million in for the site enabling works. Currently, that would bring it up to the 5 million. So basically, once we get European money, it allows us to use that money. We'll pay for the bridge, and then we'll move the money we've got in the bridge budget across for site enabling.
Nice bit of creative accounting.
We are allowed to do it. It's legitimate.
Can I just make another point with regard to the Avon Gorge? Now, a major link between Grangemouth and Bathgate and the M8, which has been a nightmare for years. It's just dragging on. The convener talked about persuasive ways with the government. Is it not about time the Scottish Government actually grabbed the nettle here? If this was a motorway project, then I'm not so sure that we'd be waiting on two councils to stump up for it. Shouldn't we be putting some pressure onto the Scottish Government to get ahead with this project, given the amount of time it's been on the drawing board for, and how important it is to improving the infrastructure of the area?
We have been in discussions, and to be fair, it's all been as a result of COVID that those discussions have been delayed. We've been speaking to our colleagues in West Lothian as well, and like other councils, they're all going through a state of flux and reassessing their budgets. So we do need to get back around the table and have the discussions around the Avon Gorge and bring forward that particular pack. I think it's just complicated because it is two local authorities, Scottish Government and the TIF that make it up. But we are aware that the costs have increased obviously significantly over the time period, and everyone's budgets are going to be under pressure, including Scottish Government. But we have raised it. We did have a meeting in the diary prior to COVID. Unfortunately, that's been delayed. But we will look to get back onto it as quickly as we can and start having those persuasive conversations.
Thanks, convener.
Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, convener. A couple of questions for Mr. Duff. On 4.2 on page 197, 1,400 jobs. Where are they specifically? Where are they, Douglas? That's my first question.
Okay, Douglas.
Yeah. These jobs are in, as I say, there's around 30 different sites that we monitor through the TIF to see any development taking place. And the main locations where these jobs have come forward is in Grangemouth, particularly down at the Errol's Gate area. So the new Asda distribution centre was opened in the early years after the TIF was established. And a key tool for that development to come forward was the need to upgrade the roundabout on the M9. There's been other developments taking place down at Errol's Gate since then. We've also seen developments down at the likes of the INEOS site and elsewhere in Grangemouth, down in the port. There's been new warehouse developments taking place in the port, and some new units we've done ourselves over at Abbotsford Business Park. So we monitor that, aggregate up, we connect with the companies, get an update from them on the jobs that are associated with the businesses they operate on these sites, and that's what contributes to that number.
Thank you, Douglas. My next one is probably leading on for Nigel about the Avon Gorge. Grangemouth is identified, it's the only port identified UK government and the Scottish government together. So how important it is. I wrote to the Transport Secretary when I first was elected, Mr. Youssef, and he said to me that it was being considered for the next major infrastructure 2021, and I know Angus MacDonald has been pushing for some clarity and some information on it. I take the conveners saying that it's the COVID that's hung it, that's put it back. But for me, I'm the same as Nigel. I think it's imperative for Falkirk and Grangemouth as a area that we get this going forward and get it up and running. Just on the question I've got on that, Douglas, our money for the Avon Gorge 2.9 million, is clothing the same amount?
Yeah, I mean, there's a rule of thumb that we've been working to, that if the council's found half of the money and split that 25%, then the Scottish Government would meet the other half. That's been the basis of those discussions. But clearly, this has been, moving over the course of the years it's taken to get this up and running, and so costs are increasing. That obviously puts pressure on West Lothian and the government to demonstrate their ability to commit to it. So we've kept the money in the TIF, but we're still reliant on the contributions from the others.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Duff. Thank you, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, convener. Obviously, in the long term, Brexit and COVID is going to have financial implications for more or less everything that we do in the future. I don't see TIF being any different. In the event of the TIF funding being reduced by the government, Douglas, what proposals do we have, or contingencies do we have to scale back on what we've got planned? That was my first question. The other side of it is that I agree totally with the comments regarding the Avon Gorge This situation has been going on for far too long. It was an issue when we were in administration. It's still an issue now. And I think not just because of the link with Grangemouth, but if you look at the proposals for house building in the area, in Polmont and Madison and the surrounding area around about there, there's even more need for it as a link, especially during the winter. If you travel that road at all, it is dangerous during the winter. And I'm surprised that the Scottish Government hasn't been able to force the other two local authorities to actually go ahead with this. We've got the money allocated for it. It's not our problem. And I hear what you say, Convener. We need to sit down and have some future discussions regarding this on an urgent basis. But we need to try and draw some sort of timeline to get this implemented and get it dealt with. And then we can take it off our list. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, Douglas, I mean, we know that we have been in dialogue, and we have highlighted the need for the Avon Gorge, particularly as a result of the chaos that was created as a result of the landslide, the damage to the road during that time. And we have had some discussions already around this, but unfortunately, you know, the meeting that we had planned fell by the wayside just as COVID came in. So it is on the radar, and certainly we will get back on and try, and hopefully we can maybe make some bids into the various funding streams that perhaps are around now, particularly around the green energy aspects, the use of some of those funds to improve roads infrastructure as well. But we'll certainly try and pull something together very quickly, and we'll be able to give members an update.
Thanks, Convener. Can Douglas maybe just confirm what contingencies or anything that we're building in as well? Thank you.
Douglas?
Happy to do that, Convener. We keep the TIF programme under annual review, so we bring this programme to you every year to deal with the adjustments. In the past year, we've done a very thorough review of the TIF programme. That's involved our finance team and colleagues from Scottish Enterprise, Scottish Futures Trust, to look at the assumptions that we had in the initial business case and how we're doing against that. So the make-up of the 141 million of income that we anticipate over the period of the TIF, we've reviewed that, having regard to the development that has taken place already and the development that we anticipate in the remaining period of the TIF. We will keep an eye to that, obviously, given, as you say, the COVID and Brexit situations, and we would use our understanding of that to stage our decisions on any future commitments to capital projects. So clearly, through to 25-26, we'll be reaching decisions in each of these years about the onward commitment of capital funds and whether they're affordable within the envelope of the TIF. And that would be the means whereby we could adjust to meet any pressure that would arise there.
Thanks, Convener.
Thank you. Is there any other member who would? Councillor Gardner?
Thanks, Convener. This is just to reiterate and assure members, and it's not often I agree with two members of Conservative groups and some of the things they did say, but I do agree it's imperative, and as Council Leader stated, that we move on with Avon Gorge situation there. We will continue to meet with ministers and highlight the need for this infrastructure, and we have been meeting on we had meetings planned for just prior to lockdown, and as soon as we can do that again, we will move forward with that. We do realise how important it is for the full area, not just the people that use it on a daily basis, and we will continue to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Bissett?
Thanks, Convener. I'd just like to say, I think it's the Avon Gorge. It has been going on a long time, and it is really dangerous, and it should be a top priority as far as I'm concerned. I'm glad to see the TIF continuing to be implemented, and I'd just like to acknowledge that it was implemented by the previous Labour administration, and all credit to Craig Martin for introducing it. I'd just like to ask about the Westfield roundabout. Does that still have to go to planning first before it goes ahead? Because it does say works are expected to commence in the financial year 2022. So, does it have to come to planning first? I actually thought it had to come to planning before it was commissioned. Thank you.
I think there's a multitude of things that will happen before the big sort of build in the planning application. Douglas, do you want to just maybe say a wee bit around that?
Yep, certainly from this meeting we'll be primed to get that work underway, get planning submission made for it, and hopefully get started on the ground next year. It's a big important project for the council, and as we're saying, you know, that this has got a real benefit for the area's economy. So we will hope to move that very smoothly from this meeting.
I'm correct in saying that we need to do the bridge infrastructure works in order for the gateway to kick in and the development around that. So that it is quite critical that we're able to move forward with it. Yeah,
I mean, it's all part of an integrated package for the development down in that area.
Councillor Kerr.
I know I've spoken before, previous convener. I just want a point of clarity, if I may.
Yeah, on you go.
When you mentioned Ices Brae, Douglas, when you come down Ices Brae with the roundabout, are we talking about the road where Malcolm's is in the industrial area there? That's fine, convener. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. If everybody is content and there's no other members, Councillor Alexander's kind of disappeared. I don't know whether he wants to make any final comments.
No, I think the debate's been quite good, quite positive, and you know, on Robert Bissett's point as well, it was the previous Labour administration that introduced this, and we supported it at the time because it didn't matter to us who got the credit. So the important thing was there was an investment. So we hope that that's something that will be remembered and welcomed and acted upon in the not too distant future.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Alexander. Can we agree the report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Great, thank you. Next item is Digital Falkirk, and it's Mr. Ritchie that's going to take that one.
Thank you, convener. I thought I might start just by setting out for members the links that this report has with a number of reports on this agenda and what will come to council at the end of September. So our digital strategy links back in to the SPR that we spoke about earlier this morning. It will link into the Anytime Anywhere report that we'll come on to speak about in the next item on the agenda. I'm just looking to the council meeting at the end of September. It's got clear links into the corporate plan, into our business plan, and therefore into our capital programme report. So it's a significant report that's before members this morning, and the report sets out our digital ambitions in the short to medium term. The strategy reflects the experience and learning from COVID and feedback from members, from our communities and our employees of the importance of digital capability moving forward. The report, while setting out our digital ambitions to support our communities, to support enterprise and drive innovation. Funding for these ambitions are set out in the report, but consideration of the resourcing of the strategy will fall to the council meeting at the end of the month, where the capital programme bids for digital infrastructure will be considered alongside various other capital programme bids. The digital strategy before members covers a wide range of areas, including digital health and care, mobile and flexible working, digital learning and teaching, public Wi-Fi, digital inclusion, CCTV, and ultra-fast broadband across the district. It's an ambitious set of proposals that we have in our strategy for members, and something that I would commend members to support, and the recommendations, convener, are set out in section 2 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. And I think the strategy is very good. It's very clear. I like the way it's laid out. I think it's something that's quite easy to understand. But more of what's important is obviously the content. The response to COVID-19 pandemic reinforced the essential role of digital within the national infrastructure of the Scottish digital platforms, and the challenges of getting working and where the opportunities are. Local government has become the leader in digital transformation in Scotland as well, and is well placed to understand the opportunities and the challenges we face moving forward. It's important that we capture the positive change and build upon it. With finances at both national and local government likely to continue to be pressured, we must focus on continuing to deliver good quality local services for people. New ways of working, mobile and flexible, near-me online access to healthcare, giving the potential to free up acute facilities, taking the strain off the NHS, as well as access to training and employment, and many other council services around the area will enable our communities to have those good quality services. It will enable staff to free up more time for those who don't have the ability to self-help and need that face-to-face engagement. And as well as giving that enabling aspect to our many communities who are currently digitally isolated through infrastructure. I think it's a good report. It's something that we need to do. I think that the experience that we've had over the last 6 months has highlighted this and the need to escalate it. I appreciate that many members around the table, or the virtual table, here will feel at times digitally challenged just with the intricacies of the workings of our system, but I think we need to accept that we're in that period of flux, and that's why that we don't have all the systems working as effectively as maybe we would want them, but it is a way forward, and we need to look to embrace this, and that is one way that we'll be able to continue to provide good quality services and enable those that are most vulnerable to be able to access the face-to-face. I'm happy to remove the report and the recommendations as per section 2.1 of the report, and anticipate there will be further discussion around that when we review the capital programme on the 30th of September. Councillor McHugh.
Thanks, convener. I'm happy to second this report. I'd like to echo our leader's comments there. I think we can recognise that the need for us to be moving forward with this in all areas, for all age groups, and it is a challenge. It's a challenge for our elderly age group because not all of them are silver surfers. My mum has mastered buying things off the internet, and that's about all. So we obviously recognise that we desperately need to move forward with this. Like the SPR, there is huge changes afoot, and I welcome them. I find it's an exciting time that I think COVID has pushed us right into the next century, and we really need to embrace it and look at the positives and understand from the negatives and the experiences we've had, but at the same time see the positives and move on. Like the SPR, there's a lot of buildings within our estate that are not fit for purpose for us moving forward in digital ways as well. So really embracing the two together and moving forward is the best way to go. I move, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh. I'll open up for questions and comments. Councillor Colley.
Hi. Yes, I think I, in general, want to welcome the report, probably specifically focusing on the support for health and care. And I think digital has been used quite successfully. It was called analogue then, in relation to supporting people in telehealth care for years. And I think that we've got some real opportunities now to move that forward to support people better. And the partnership has been very innovative in utilising digital supports and assessments with the Living Well Falkirk self-assessment tool to help people with support for their activities for daily living, better and a new tool for assessment which is based on outcomes is being introduced, and that will really support our social workers and OTs in providing the best assessments possible for individuals to meet the outcomes that they wish to achieve. So I think it's a great opportunity, and I think I take the point that Councillor McHugh makes around not everybody is digitally literate, but there are things around that provide digital support that don't necessarily require that digital literacy. But I think we've got some opportunities, and I think the strategy is very good. So,
thank you, Councillor McHugh. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. There's no doubt at all that the digital future is the direction of travel. It seems to be like it's an unstoppable force, it's going forward, it's going to happen, and if you didn't adapt, you'll get left behind. So I do welcome the report, and I'll just say my concerns are around people's mental health, really. That, Mrs Smith likes to go and pay her council tax at a hub somewhere and has a bit of dialogue with somebody. How are you doing the day? How's your husband? And how's the family? And that kind of lose a bit. You'll kind of lose something with the sort of digital, in the digital age. That's that kind of social interaction, I guess. I think we're all experiencing it right now. We're sitting looking at screens. But normally, if you're in the council, you're a bit more interactive and socially engaged. So I welcome it and look forward to the capital programme coming forward to the council. And but it's just an observation that I thought I'd make around the kind of we kind of lose something, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Convener. I mean, it's already been stated by a number of members this morning. Post-COVID, I think the digital side of things is going to become even more important, obviously not just in schools for our pupils, but for local communities as well. We can't lose sight of the fact, obviously, that not everybody has internet access, and that's been mentioned a few times already as well. We need to make sure that we still have other avenues of getting information out to people who don't have access at the moment. And this is obviously on top of all the funding restrictions. I think every report that we've discussed today so far, there's been funding implications regarding COVID or Brexit or both. So, I mean, that's going to be part of the equation as well. But this digital situation, I welcome it. I think it's a fantastic idea. It's the future, and we need to continue to embrace it, obviously subject to the funding being available. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Nimmo. Is there any other members? Councillor Kerr, you're back with us. You can hear us.
I can hear you, Convener. I never heard a word that was said in the full report, but I welcome, as everybody else says that I've just heard, Robert and Alan. The digital is the future for not just this council, but for the world, and anything that enhances our our council can only be commended. So if people have done long speeches, I'm glad I didn't hear yous, but I support the digital strategy, convener. Thank you.
Thank
Convener,
you, Councillor
Convener,
Kerr.
sorry, we need to get a
Yep.
course in lip reading for elected members, I think.
Well, we may have to do that, yes, as well. Some things are easier to lip read than others, though. Thank you. I think it's important that we recognise within the reports that are coming forward to council that there's probably going to be a theme, and there's going to be priorities determined, and if we are serious about those priorities, then we're going to have to look to identify funding. That's always going to be challenging, but it's something that as individual political groups we're all going to have to think about as we head towards council, and deciding to which areas are the greatest priorities. Is there any other member that wishes to comment on this particular report, or can we agree the report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Okay, talking about digital, this one does very nicely fit in with the discussions we've just had, and it's the any employees returning to work update. And Mr. Ritchie.
Thank you, convener. So members received a report to the June emergency executive on anytime, anywhere, and the return of employees to the workplace. So this report provides members with an update on where we are in that process. We start off with a reminder of the national guidance in terms of phase 3 and phase 4, and the national guidance is that wherever possible we should be working from home. As members know, we're currently in phase 3 of the national route map, but even at phase 4, the expectation is that where you can work from home, then that's what you should be doing. We've now got about 1,300 employees who are working from home, and when we last reported, we maybe had just over 3,000 employees were working from home. So clearly the biggest change there is teachers going back to schools. We touched in the report just about buildings and the opening of buildings being subject to statutory and other checks, and that these are being prioritised for front-facing premises. And we also referenced the fact that, just going back to the discussions on SPR, prioritisation is around buildings which don't have the under review category within the SPR. Looking at the interim arrangements of when employees may be able to return to the workplace, we're working on the assumption that our buildings will have a 30% occupancy level. That should provide for appropriate physical distancing and minimise the need for employees to self-isolate under test and protect. We're using Abbotsford House, and we've got a video being prepared for Abbotsford House, which we'll send to employees just to see what the workspace will look like when they return to the office. Managers have been advised not to ask employees to attend offices unnecessarily. That's an important message, I think, for us. Risk assessments are being prepared for each location, and these will be shared with all our employees prior to their return to work. We talk in section 417 about home working, and this touches on the last report that we had. And in 417, we start to talk about the need for appropriate equipment for employees if if working from home is going to be part of the working model moving forward. And a specification has been prepared on what equipment employees should have if they are working from home in proper conditions. Section 420 in the report is an important one, which picks up on the well-being of our employees, and we've got information on our web pages for employees regarding some good advice on their well-being. Well-being should get picked up in one-to-one meetings and just in general chats across the workforce with colleagues. Risk assessments will be carried out for each employee prior to their return to work to identify what their support needs are and appropriate support plans put in place should that be required. Para 412 picks up on the specific advice around those who were shielding, self-isolating or pregnant. Section 426 picks up on communication. We've got the feedback from the Pulse survey that was carried out over the course of the summer, and we've had a couple of employee focus groups on the back of the Pulse survey, and an action plan is going to be prepared. We make reference to the ongoing weekly meetings that we have with our trade unions, and these are helpful to draw out any matters and concerns that they have. We know from the feedback from the Pulse survey that around half of those who replied saw themselves working 2, 3, perhaps more 2 or 3 days a week at home under a new working environment. About a fifth of the employees who responded said that they really didn't want to work from home. So the job for us is to find an appropriate model which meets the requirements of all of our employees and the organisation as well. So we're going to end up with a blended model of touchdown spaces for those employees who want to come in. But in all probability, that's not going to be on the basis of how we used to work, i.e. 5 days a week. I spoke about the kind of interim working assumption of a 30% occupancy rate. Looking further out, we're looking at somewhere in the region of about 0.5 FTE as we move forward into new HQ arrangements. So that means that in broad terms, we're thinking that on average, an employee will spend half their week working from home and half the week in an office. And we need to make sure that our employees have the right equipment, whether that's at home or in the office, and are supported in the round, whether they're at home or in the office. And I spoke about the support plans that will be put in place for both of these circumstances. Finally, Convener, Section 6 picks up on the issue of IT provision to allow all of this to happen. And that kind of takes us back into the last report that we spoke about and forward into the capital report that will be considered by Council at the end of September. And I'll leave it there, Convener, and I'm happy to pick up any questions that members have. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. We are in a flux, and while we were moving in a particular direction anyway, I think that the pandemic has forced our hands and escalated change. We've not yet found what our new normal is. towards finding what is going to be our new normal. And the restrictions around movement is still there, and probably will be for some time to come. And in some aspects, it may never ever go back to what it was before. But I think the engagement with staff, I think that's been a really positive piece of work around the Pulse survey. And as a result of being sort of forced into new ways of working, significant majority have embraced it and don't want to go back to the way they worked before. They don't want to go back to a full time in the office. And while there was some reticence there previously, as that was the direction we were trying to move in, it has created some opportunities to move things forward with that aspect of our transformation. Many anxieties over remote and flexible working has been unfounded. In fact, in many cases, the productivity has been increased, and opportunities for a better work-life balance with families has emerged. In fact, just yesterday, in between doing other things, I took the opportunity to nip in to Costa. There are other coffee shops available, just before I get into bother for advertising. And I met two of our housing officers busily beavering away, having been out on their patch, doing visits. We were doing the updates, doing the emails, and working on a document that was due to be fed back into the office. And I just took the opportunity to speak to them and ask them how did they feel about things. He says, yes, it's a bit strange, but I actually quite like it. Sometimes you can come into the office to do a piece of work and it's easy to get distracted, whereas this way you can be quite focused and finish that piece of work, and indeed have the flexibility to perhaps finish a little bit earlier, deal with the family situation, and once the family situation has calmed down, the kids are perhaps in their bed, you have a couple of hours there, so there's a much better way to balance it, and they cut down on travelling time as well. This channel shift will still require investment, and Stuart's outlined that there will be a bid coming forward as part of the capital programme. Also, will be very, very clear we need to have get good guidance on staff welfare, because I'm sure that anyone that has sat down to work for a day at home finds you forget to do a lot of things. You forget to get up and move about, you forget what time it is to eat. And you find yourself just working and perhaps have never actually been outside and got fresh air in that day. So I think there has to be clear guidance about being able to work from home and good practice for those that want to work remotely. But we also have to be able to accommodate those that can't work from home for whatever reason. It may not be practical, it may not be the way that they're able to function, and enable them to actually have a balance, but be able to have that office space as well. Also, this does create opportunities, because even at the current 30% level, we were going to have an excess of office space. That office space will cost us money to continue to have. And by reducing that, it will actually free up resources to be able to be directed back into services, to providing service in a different way, and the face-to-face for those that need it. And Robert Bissett mentioned how important the social aspect was in the previous item. Similarly, that there's a part of that, particularly for likes of our housing staff, being able to be out far more in their patch, and being able to actually have much more direct contact with our tenants, and therefore that social aspect may well be able to be filled in a different way, and doing just basically welfare checks, which is going to become more and more important as we go forward. I'm happy to support the report coming forward. I think there's been some good staff engagement. Our trade unions have been a massive support, I think, in taking things forward and getting to this point. I hope we're able to continue that very positive relationship going forward. So, and on that, I will move the report. Councillor Colley.
I'm not intending to say much because I know it's been a long agenda, but I think just to reflect that I think it's clear that we won't be returning to business as usual. And I think what's clear from the staff survey is nor should we be. The pandemic, as you said, has opened up alternative ways of working, working from home and more flexibility. And it's got clear benefits for staff wellbeing. It's got clear benefits, particularly for employees who have family responsibilities, be that children or caring responsibilities, and equally for people with disabilities and long-term conditions. So I think it's a positive move. I'm very pleased to see the focus on a blended approach and working individually with staff members on what works for them, because they are at the heart of delivering the best service that we can. And I think probably as a little aside, the convener mentioned the reduction in commuting, and I think there's something around that about a reduction in emissions and perhaps making some inroads in our climate change ambitions. So with that, I'm happy to second the report.
Thank you, Councillor Colley. I'll open it up now for questions and comments. Councillor Nimmo.
Just a question for Stuart, if I can ask. Playing devil's advocate here, convener, but can Stuart confirm how many councillors have actually completed a risk assessment for working in the municipal buildings? Or any councillors for that matter? We might not be employees, but we're covered by the Health and Safety at Work Act. So, thanks, convener.
Before Stuart comes in, I know that certainly my office was checked for compliance, and the number of people that could at any one time is a maximum of 4. So I don't know what arrangements were made for the rest, but maybe Stuart will be able to tell us.
I don't have that information, convener. Whether Colin has that information, but sorry, I don't have that information.
Okay, we've got Mr. Moody here.
But I do know there is a generic risk assessment for working within offices in the municipal buildings, which I suspect will have been relied upon.
Convener, I would have thought that elected members would have had sight of some document. I certainly haven't seen anything, and I've been in the buildings on a few occasions, not very often. Usually just going to print something off, but I've not seen sight of anything at all.
Certainly, as a rule of thumb, I think that the majority are not anticipated to be in for any length of time without having had an assessment carried out of their office. I'm sorry, we're getting a terrible echo. Okay. That's it. I think that might be us now. That might be better now. And I think, you know, the rule of thumb is you're not expected to be in for any length of time without having had the office checked. Certainly the caretakers have been going round, measuring stick, checking all the offices. But what we can do is we'll arrange to get information sent out to members on that. Councillor Harris.
Thanks, convener. There was mention made of Abbotsford House and how things are going there. My presumption, therefore, is that looking at para 4.5, which talks about the office buildings in particular, which are subject to change, are second in line for opening up, but the inference from what Stuart said was that the Abbotsford House would be opening up. I just want to ask, what is the commitment to opening up the municipal buildings? Okay, we know that there are going to only be about a third of staff at any one time, but clearly the municipal buildings sit in the centre of town, very public, a very public face of the council. And I think it's about time that we gave some reassurance to the public that the council is still working and that the council offices, the headquarters, are going to get back into use. Do we have a commitment to reopen the offices, the HQ, to business under the new way of working?
Mr. Ritchie, do you want to take that?
Yeah, thanks, convener. Sorry if I've caused a bit of confusion here. What we're doing is setting up Abbotsford House to undertake a video that we can use to send to employees of what the new workplace will look like when our employees return to work. So that doesn't mean that Abbotsford will be ahead of any of the other office buildings mentioned in that paragraph. We're just using Abbotsford House as an exemplar for the purposes of the video. In terms of the opening of the buildings that are referred to in section 4.5 of the report, I'll just go back to, I think, what I said in my opening remarks to a committee, which is that we're following the government's national route map, which at phase 3 and 4 is recommending that where you are able to work from home, that you do work from home, and that, as far as I know, is the way that most councils are approaching this matter.
It doesn't quite answer my question, therefore. Is there a commitment to open up the headquarters at some stage on the route, on the Scottish Government's route map for those staff and councillors, elected members who wish to work within the office environment and have the necessary risk management checks being done on these buildings? I would include in that Abbotsford House and Sealock House. I mean, for example, I'm expected to be in Sealock House next week for an appointments committee. So clearly, there's a little bit of business going on.
I think that there are essential workers and people will come in to do essential pieces of work within buildings. And certainly I have attended an appointments committee, as has Councillor McHugh, within the Lock House, and when you go you will see that there are very few staff actually in the building. However, it is set up to allow social distancing and work to be able to continue. Similarly, there are aspects of Abbotsford House where there needs to be some face-to-face meetings that actually take place. And again, if you go to Abbotsford House, you can count probably on two hands throughout the whole building how many people are in that at any one time. But it is possible to have a meeting room that's set up for social distancing. Similarly, we have the facility within the municipal buildings as well to be able to do that. But fundamentally, until we are given further guidance from government, there is no anticipation of the buildings opening up for as it was previously. And that is part of our future discussions, and indeed it's related to this report going forward.
Okay, I'm still not quite clear on the commitment that it will be the HQ that will open up, and the HQ is being used for children's panel, I think, according to the notice on the doors. But clearly it's okay for some to be in the building, but not okay. I think we need to think about the message that we send out to the public about what our council's doing. on what its proposals are.
I will get Mr Moody to maybe come in and give an explanation around the children's panel.
Yes, thank you, Convener. The use by Children's Hearing Scotland is a very specific and time-limited use, and it was to respond to a request by the Children's Hearing System to allow some space to create some socially distanced physical children's hearings. And there was a significant backlog of hearings that built up during the lockdown period. So it was felt appropriate from the Council's perspective to assist our colleagues within the Children's Hearing System by allowing some of the committee rooms to be made available while they weren't being used for physical council meetings.
Okay, thanks for that then, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. I totally understand the Stuart's comments regarding people not wanting to work at home all the time, not wanting to be in an office all the time, and as many speakers have said, that's the road that we were looking to travel down before the COVID, and I welcome that, Convener. But we're only talking about office staff here. What about the joiners and the plumbers and the sparkies? Are we no considering them? Are they not getting, or is it just office staff that, because of the confined space that we're in? That's my first question.
Okay, there are numbers of ways that our craft staff are working differently, but I'll bring in Mr Ritchie.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe just a couple of things. I'll go back to the government's route map. So for things like housing repairs, provisions made in the route map back at phase 2 for that work to start up again, provided a number of measures are put in place around ensuring that there is no one with any COVID illness or symptoms within the house. Prior arrangements made a limitation on the number of employees who are working in a property at any time. Different arrangements made as far as getting to and from jobs are concerned, and issues around social distancing when employees are at depots, for example. So maybe that covers off the issue of tradesmen. The other issue, I think, specifically relates to office workers, which is what essentially we're talking about in this report here. And I'll go back to the government's route map, which is that office workers should, wherever possible, be working from home at stage 3 and at stage 4 as part of the government's national route map. So I think what we're doing is, for each of the different types of employees that we've got, following the government's route map and going back to the recovery reports that were considered by the emergency executive in June, we identified as part of these recovery plans what services we would be able to provide in what model at what time during that kind of 4-phase national recovery plan that the government set out.
James.
Thank you, Mr Ritchie. Next is, and Councillor Coley mentioned it about people's well-being, and Councillor McHugh mentioned it as well earlier on in one of the other reports, where people didn't always want to work for home because, as has been stated previously, they didn't get up and walk about, they didn't go outside. I just probably know that the same as Nigel, but I think when it's possible or we reach that stage, we give the opportunity to people who want to come in. We let them in, and if there's a blended way of working, we commit to that. I'm looking at the back in my office. There are about 80 cars out in the car park in the municipal buildings. 80. So there is people who are working in the buildings, and I'm sure they'll be working safely. And it's giving people the choice. And I just hope that that's the way we do it going forward, Convener. Thank you.
Just to say, Councillor Kerr, that the cars in the rear car park will not all be people working in the municipal buildings, and there'll be a significant number of them that are working for the police, and from other places, but even within the town centre. We don't have controlled parking just now in the rear car park, so people are seeing it's an opportunity for free parking. But the police do use the rear car park, so it's not all everybody that's in the municipal buildings.
Let's charge them, Convener. Let's
Partnership working. Okay, if there are no more contributions, Councillor Reid.
Yes, I'll be very brief, Convener. It looks as though we're moving from a temporary situation, which was born out of necessity, to a permanent situation. Does that mean that each individual employee will receive a new contract? Those that are working at home particularly? Or will it just be open season time?
Mr Ritchie, are you able to comment on that, to whether we've bottomed that out?
Thanks. Not sure we have bottomed that out yet, so something we need to go back at. I mean, I think the main thing we need to do as far as those employees who are working from home is to make sure that they have the appropriate kit and support to be able to work from home, and that needs to look like what it would do in the office. So we can't have people using the edge of tables, for example, at home to work, and chairs which are not suitable for them. So I said in my presentation there's a specification being prepared, and we're currently asking employees what their requirements would be for home working. So there's a piece of work that needs to be finished on that and pulling that together, and that will form part of the capital programme bid that members will consider at the end of September.
Okay, you content with that, Pat?
Not really, no. I would have thought we have to determine to some extent when these employees will be available to the council, and vice versa, of course. We have to protect both interests, and that's usually done through a contract.
I think there are very few of our contracts that specify where an employee is required to work. So there won't be in someone's contract something that says you're required to work at the municipal buildings in Falkirk. What it will do is say that, you know, you're required to work whatever it is, 35, 37 hours. And, you know, that'll be something that will be determined between yourself and your manager. But I think over time there has been a great flexibility on how employees work, and that flexibility has just been enhanced over the course of the last 5 or 6 months, where, you know, you've got employees with childcare responsibilities who got a different working arrangement than they would have had they been back in the office. So they're still providing the hours of their contract, but it wouldn't have been in the terms of the hours that they would have been had they been sat in the office working at the municipal buildings or Sea Lock House, you know, or wherever.
Okay, you okay with that, Pat? Not giving you a bit more?
I'll have to think that one through. But that's not unusual.
Right. Okay, I've got Councillor Bissett, then Councillor McHugh.
Thanks, Convener. Welcome this report, another well-written report, by the way. And I just wanted to say, normally if people are coming to their work, they've got a routine, you know, regular breaks, and they go to the canteen for so they do take these breaks. So how do we assure that they are doing this at home? They are taking a time away for this, for these laptops. We've been sitting looking at a laptop for the past 3 hours, which is a bit too long, to be honest. I know there's rules that you should be looking away for it every so often and stuff like that. It can affect your vision and give you headaches and stuff like that. So it's well that over presentation at work can be as bad as under presentation at work, where it can be signs of people under stress and no coping. So how do we know that people at home are not constantly on their laptops and doing work when they shouldn't really be doing it? How do we kind of control that, just to make sure that they're kind of sticking to the guidelines? So I'm conscious that there are people who are under stress, grab their laptop, start writing reports, answering emails, all the rest of it. It's just to ensure the well-being of the employees is paramount, really, and make sure that's in place. So it's just like a couple of observations, but I agree with the report that has to set out some guidelines for the future. And I just wanted to also ask, are these statutory checks being done in all the buildings? You know, the water checks, electrical tests, fire alarm tests, that they can be done in all the buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. Stuart, do you want to pick up about the well-being and the contact, the supervision contact, and the checks in the buildings, please?
Yeah, thanks. I'll pick up on the issues of well-being, and maybe Douglas can pick up on the statutory checks on the buildings. Councillor Bissett makes a very good point, and highlighted that in the presentation to the report and its reference in the committee report itself. Well-being is a really important area for us, particularly in the current circumstances. So, you know, the one-to-one contact and discussions between the manager and the employees is really important, and it's important that these discussions are as wide as possible and involve more than just tasks of work. It needs to be about, you know, the employees' well-being. I've mentioned in the report, you know, a number of areas. For example, our website, where some advice on well-being. We also reintroduced our counselling service this year, so employees can self-refer to the counselling service if they need advice. So, you know, it's something that we've tried to stress to managers, that they need to be having these conversations with their colleagues, and something that we've tried to emphasise just to the workforce in general, that support arrangements are there if you need them, and if you don't want to do that through the council structure, you can self-refer through the employee counselling service if that's something that you would rather do. Hopefully that picks up on the issue of well-being, and you'll see the information that came out in the Pulse survey when we asked employees about well-being as well. Maybe Douglas could pick up the issue of the statutory tests in our properties and where we are in that programme of work, which I know has been taken forward by the facilities team.
To pick up on that, Stuart. So, yeah, so Colin McRobbie from the facilities team has been a participant to the working group that's been pulling this area of work together. And the team have been working through the series of statutory checks that all our buildings need. And obviously a primary focus of that has been the school estate, and significant amount of work on that took place over the summer. But they are working through the rest of the properties that the council has in preparation for opening up. So that's been done on a phased and prioritised basis, and the corporate management team has been involved in all of that process. Obviously, we've prioritised things like statutory check arrangements take place for fire alarm testing and so on, and that will be put back onto the regular footing with premise managers in each location once they're back into place.
Thanks very much.
Okay, before I bring in anybody else on this item, just to highlight, we've now, as Robert said, we have been going on for over 3 hours. We are due to have a break after 3 hours. We have got 2 items to go, but I'm in your hands. I'm happy if you want to complete this item and then we go to a short break. But as I say, there's also pressures on further meetings this afternoon, and so I'm kind of in members' hands to what you want to do.
Maybe just a 10-minute break.
Okay, Councillor Nimmo.
Convener, I'm actually happy just to continue the 2 items that are left. I've had my lunch. I just switched my camera off for 5 minutes and sat and had a sausage roll. So,
well, unfortunately, not all of us have that opportunity, Councillor Nimmo. But I'm in your hands if people want a short break.
This is a rarity. I'll agree with Councillor Nimmo. I'm happy to continue as well.
Me too.
Continue.
I think there may well be some people that are required to go and refresh themselves.
I think if you're saying yourself, convener, obviously you don't have the option of switching your video off. I'm happy for a 10-minute break, even though, like others, I have switched my video off and had something to eat. But it's not just about the self, it's about the communal good. So 10 minutes is the end of the world.
If we could complete this item and then we'll just have a very brief comfort break, and then we can continue and just highlight that it's up to members how long these meetings take, not necessarily up to me. Councillor McHugh, did you have something you wanted to say other than looking for a quick short break?
Yes, I did. I'll be very brief. Just leading on from Councillor Reid, I believe that there is some staff groups that fill in an online diary of their hours and what work they're covering. So it's like a clocking in type of system. So the employer knows that they're putting their hours in, and also we know how many if they're doing overtime. And to Stuart, I assume that in the future we'll be looking at our work-life balance policy, our flexible working policy, and our family-friendly policies as we move forward. Because as Councillor Reid has highlighted, we are moving into a different way of working from the past. And I know in the past there has been some controversy over these policies where we've got families that need, and we've always responded with, well, it's to do with business needs, and we have to be flexible on both sides in that matter. Thanks.
Mr. Richard, you want to very briefly make a comment?
I think we're living in different times, aren't we? So, I'm not sure whether it's about revising the policies or just being sensible and reflecting the times that we're in. But if we need to revise the policies formally, then yeah, that's what we'll do.
Okay, thank you. Alan, briefly.
Just a quick point before we break for the comfort break. Just in relation to the... Sorry, I've lost the place again. In relation to the home working, in normal practice with home working, there would need to be some sort of occupational health assessment done in normal circumstances. And the home working would come on the back of that assessment. We don't have that process with this, and I've got concerns about individuals not being best placed to identify whether they can home work or not, whether it's appropriate. Now, I don't think managers are qualified to make that judgment either, because in a lot of cases, managers aren't going to know whether employees have specific disabilities. So how are we going to assess that side of things to make sure that individuals that are working from home or want to work from home are going to be working in a safe environment? Thanks, Convener.
Thank you. I think from my memory, and I think it's maybe in the paper somewhere, our occupational health colleagues have prepared a self-assessment, which all employees would be asked to fill out. We're not in a perfect world right now. It does give a baseline information that would enable safe working at home, but I'll ask Mr. Ritchie maybe just to clarify that.
Great, Convener, I don't think I can add any more to what you've said.
Well, Convener, again, elected members, myself being one of them, I've not filled out anything to allow me to work from home. So what's happening?
Mr. Moody?
I think that's a reasonable point that Councillor Nimmo has raised. I'll take it away and I'll revert to him. Okay,
thank you. Okay, Councillor Alexander, can you make it very brief, because I want to bring this item to a conclusion?
Always do. Just a quick one. In terms of the roles of members within the process over the last 7-8 months, I don't know about you, but the number of people have phoned up and said, I can't get through the council, I'm looking for a service, I can't get it, and I've come to you as a local council. We're working from home as well, but there didn't seem to be the same sort of emphasis in terms of providing backup services for elected members to us to do our duty. And primarily it was elderly people, vulnerable people that were contacting us, or contacting me during the lockdown. So it's something we need to have a look at in future. If people they work away from home, or work from home, sorry, then we need to have more details as to when they're available for consultation, and we need to make better use of the voicemail. That was another thing that I found that wasn't as up to date as it could be, the number of people using voicemail. Was that brief enough?
Here, Councillor Alexander. Here.
Okay, thank you. Can we therefore agree the report?
Agreed.
Okay, it's now 13:25. Can we maybe come back just after past?
Yep.
Again, the recording has now resumed, and we're on item 11, the Roads Maintenance Capital Programme, and I think it's Douglas Duff. Douglas, are you there? Yeah. Douglas, are you going to take the... Thank you.
Happy to do that, Convener, and I think I'm not the only one who was squirming at the end of the table and in their awkward chair when Stuart referred to it earlier. Hopefully everybody's sitting comfortably. This report picks up on the budget consideration that took place back at the start of the year in February over the capital programme, and as part of that budget the council provisionally approved a further 7 million for roads investment. and requested that a report be presented to the executive on what the additional investment would achieve. And this information gives further advice relating to that. So we're asking to note the programme of works that's identified in the Appendix 1 to the report, and note the current level of spend, future commitment, and the potential carry forward of funds into 21-22. And in that context, there might be the potential to consider that in relation to the Council's budget at the meeting on the 30th of September. So the report notes that back in June 2018, members were given an update in relation to the Roads Asset Management Planning and the RAMP process. The Roads Asset Plan is a subject of a regular update to members where we detail the road network condition and the investment levels required to maintain the network in order to sustain its operations. And at that meeting, 3.871 million was agreed for structural maintenance, but a further allocation of 7 million was made for structural maintenance of the carriageway, and that acknowledged the concerns over the condition of the road network, which requires 6.4 million a year to maintain it just in its current condition. And we give some details in the report about the benchmarking with other areas. The list of works that we propose to take forward during this financial year is listed in Appendix 1, and that's in accordance with the programme agreed through the RAMP. And most of that allocated to planned structural maintenance, but it does include an allocation towards drainage improvements, particularly given the wet weather that we've all been experiencing and the risks in subsequent years that there will be further demand there. We note that the service has been continuing to operate during the COVID pandemic, and however that did have an effect on timings when the works could actually take place on site, and it wasn't until 22nd of June that the structural maintenance works could recommence. So that's had an effect both in terms of the commissioning of works through our internal teams as well as external contractors. So the schedule that's attached gives the provisional dates and notes those being undertaken by internal and external resources, as well as the provisional dates where we expect that work to take place. It notes that obviously adverse weather can affect the delivery of the programme, and in overall terms we probably lost 3 months of time in that delivery. Under Section 4, we note the financial implications of this work. Clearly it's of advantage to us in maintaining the carriageway network to have that additional £7 million. We've been working to deliver the budget in accordance with that allocation, and of the original 3.8 million budget allocation, we've identified that there would be a level of that unable to be committed to because of the delays during this year, and therefore potentially there's a need to carry forward 1.17 million into 21-22. Similarly, of the additional 7 million allocation, we expect that around 1.5 million would need to be carried forward into 21-22. So as a result, there's a total sum of 2.729 million anticipated to carry forward into next year. Therefore, there is the potential that where members minded, they could look to reallocate that through the budget meeting at the end of September if that was intended. We do note the balance of internal and external resources, and obviously we have to augment our own squads with those external resources to deliver the programme. We also highlight the risk element around this. Clearly there are risks with the delivery of the programme, and also a risk in failing to maintain the network to a satisfactory condition. So basically, we're asking for approval the executive notes, the programme of works that's proceeding, and it considers this in the context of the capital programme report that will be coming to the council at the end of the month. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Douglas. Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Douglas, for the full summary you've just given us on the report. This is a good, simple report explaining the additional investment as asked for. I'd like to personally thank Gary Neal, the author of this report. I know how much work he's put into it. If you could pass that on, Douglas, I'd appreciate it. There is no doubt this additional £7 million was welcomed and will increase the permanent roadworks, decreasing the temporary repairs. The investment will have a positive impact on the road network conditions. This on top of the increases made to the revenue budgets by the SNP-led administration in previous years has undoubtedly been beneficial. But we're in unprecedented times, and increasing pressure on other services and budget means that this capital investment may be out of proportion slightly. The sum of £2.729 million, which has not been allocated and as such carry forward, may well be looked at, as Douglas says, when the capital budget agenda appears at the full council on the 30th of September. I'm sure all the members have read this report and looked into the in-depth table at the back, which gives all the works carried out in every ward around the area. So yes, happy to move this report, and thank you, Douglas.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. For the moment, I'm happy to second the report formally. We'll open it up to members. Any questions or comments in relation to the report? No, we're happy to agree.
Great.
Oh, Councillor Bissett. You'll need to be a wee bit quicker, Robert.
Rob, thanks, Convener. I'm glad that Councillor Garner appreciates the £7 million that we allocated at the February budget. I don't personally think it's out of proportion, but we'll wait and see what the council meeting brings on the capital side. Just on page 243, it was highlighted that under additional £7 million, it's a wee bit pedantic here, but it's just an observation. It says Bowness and Blackness, additional £7 million. Some of the allocation is for Glenview Avenue, Banknock, so somebody's maybe just got that wrong a wee bit. It says Bowness and Blackness, Glenview Avenue, Banknock, so maybe that just needs to be changed a wee bit. So it's a wee bit pedantic, but somebody did make that observation. Apart from that, happy to agree with the report.
Okay, Councillor Neville.
Thanks, Convener. As far as any money getting carried forward to another financial year, I don't see any reason for that. I'm quite sure that we could find other additional projects, if we don't already have them, that would use up the 2 million pounds that was mentioned. I would like to see that spent in the current financial year and for projects to be identified for this amount of money. Just on a personal note, Convener, Station Road in Polmont is in my ward. Part of that road is detailed in the spend as part of the additional £7 million. The work has been done, but initially there were severe problems with the contractor. The work had to be redone at the contractor's expense. And I'm just wondering, what processes are we putting in place now to make sure that this sort of problem doesn't happen again? Because it did cause a lot of concern by the members of the public, and a lot of complaints were generated regarding this as well. So what are we doing about it? Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Point, Councillor Nimmo, it'd be up to members if they wanted to bring forward alternative projects in relation to the carryover. And obviously you're at liberty to contact officers if you need assistance with that. But Douglas, are you able to make comment with regard to the Station Road aspect and the checks on the contractor's work?
Happy to do that. I mean, their contractors are also evaluation over the course of the contract, and there's always a level of retention that's kept back from the contractor until there's the satisfactory completion to the works. And there can be a to and fro between the contractor to resolve any issues over the course of that before final sums are settled. And the performance of a contractor can affect their subsequent engagement in future contracts. So our team are very alert to the need to make sure that contractors do meet the level of expectation that we have for delivery of contracts. And we hope to resolve them over the course of the contract, but if there were substantive issues, that could affect their ability to tender for future work.
Just on the back of that, convener, I mean, obviously that the contractor in this case was given the contract and was aware of the specification involved for the resurfacing of the road. It was obviously their fault. They took it upon themselves to dig it up and redo the job again. But what practices as a council are we putting in place, or what have we put in place to make sure that another contractor or the same contractor does the same again? This road was all laid and was left to set before it was even identified that there was a problem. Why was that, Douglas?
I'm not familiar with that specific contract, Alan, so I need to find out more details about what occurred in that instance. But obviously our guys are checking with contractors. They check the work that they're doing as they progress, and initially they set out the specification. You know, that's the basis of the tender, and then there's regular checks over the course of a contract. And as I say, there's then the evaluation at the end. I would need to get more details on that contract specifically to know what the problem was there.
I'd be grateful if you could do that, Douglas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Garner, do you want to sum up?
Summing up, and yes, just covering one of the points there. Our officers are very diligent in any cases like this around the area where there has been mistakes made by the contractors. They're onto them very quickly, and they get resolutions extremely quickly. And it's not a common occurrence, but when it does happen, the guys are onto them.
Okay.
That's my summing up, convener.
Okay, are we happy to agree the report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. We now move on to item 12, which is a supplementary agenda and related to Falkirk Community Trust Recovery Plan update. And it's a report by the Chief Executive, Kenneth Laurie. Kenneth.
Thank you, convener, and good afternoon, everybody. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on the work of the Trust on recovery planning in response to the pandemic, and in particular, the approach to reopening the cultural and sports facilities that are managed by the Trust. Members may recall there was a report to the Emergency Executive on the 25th of June, at which the Trust's initial reopening plan for culture and sports facilities which it manages was agreed. And it was noted at that time the consideration of opening additional sites would be an ongoing exercise, and the Council would be consulted and advised accordingly. And the Trust has therefore provided a recovery plan update, which is attached to my report as an appendix. That covers the openings that have taken place to date, the ongoing work to open other facilities, staffing and financial implications, specific issues relating to certain premises and events. It includes a programme of work to open the remaining facilities with indicative dates, which of course are subject to the completion of all the necessary building checks. That really takes me to paragraph 3.5 of the covering report. And I'm very aware that the timescales associated with the reopening of buildings and facilities has caused some concern to elected members and indeed the public, and I think we've all been very aware of that. And of course, the reopening of buildings is critically dependent upon building system inspection checks as a result of the extended period of closure. So cleaning, disinfection, testing of the water systems after the closure has been essential, along with electrical and fire safety systems checks and required remedial works. And in relation to trust properties, these have been going on since the middle of July. And the reason for that is the commencement date in relation to trust properties was that the initial focus was on schools and ensuring that everything was done to enable schools to be open in time for the 11th of August. So it is now the case that checks have been completed for a number of trust buildings. Indicative dates for completion have been provided for those sites where building checks are in progress, and these are reflected in the programme which the Trust has drawn up and is appended to the report. The kind of challenges that there have been in terms of reopening buildings have, of course, been replicated across the country, but I think it's important, particularly, I suppose, in the context of a potential second wave, that we learn some of the lessons of our recent experience to identify how best we deal with that challenge as we go forward. The report notes the Trust's success in applying to the job retention scheme, and that combined with a number of other smaller grants and key partner funding has reduced the anticipated shortfall in the current year from 3.2 to 1.4 million. The report comments that the deficit assumes very modest levels of customer income, given the uncertainty around customer confidence returning to income generating services. In terms of the recommendations, the Emergency Executive is asked to endorse the proposed approach to the reopening of cultural and sports facilities and services managed by the Trust as soon as practicable, and as outlined in the update report, and note the further information provided by the Trust in the update report, and that further reports will be presented should any decision be required on funding in relation to the Trust. Now, Maureen Campbell is also on the call today. She can perhaps deal with the specific questions that may be in relation to the actions of the Trust and the report which is appended to my own. And on that note, Convener, I'll stop for any questions.
Thank you, Kenneth. I think what has emerged certainly over the last sort of few weeks is certainly an impatience from both the public and elected members around the Trust facilities not being open and not being accessible, and a real desire for information. And I think collectively that we've not got this right. We've not managed to manage public expectations, and I think that members had a thirst for more information and more clarity about the planning, and the need for us to be upfront and be quite clear about what the challenges in reopening the Trust properties actually were. Yeah, our focus was very much on getting the schools open, and that was the right thing to do at that time, and we did have the challenges around the water testing, specifically in the schools, that obviously took up a much more time than we'd originally anticipated, and then all of our essential buildings. But I think I would have welcomed having a bit more of a dialogue with the Trust around the challenges they were facing to try and prevent some of the undertones and the anxieties around the expectations of Trust properties opening up. But we are where we are. I think clarity from here on in, I think, would be really helpful about when, and I appreciate that some of that does rely on the information around testing coming back. but I think that even having a window to when things were going to be open would help us to support the trust in that public messaging. I am going to add a short addendum to the recommendations, or a point 3 to the recommendations, just to say to note that there has been sent by the trust asking for confirmation that the deficit funding will be available, and agrees that this should be considered by Council on the 30th of September in the context of the wider revenue budget. And I think that probably just rounds things off and takes everything into where it should be within Council for decision. So on that, I would move the recommendations with that addendum. Councillor Garner.
Thanks, Convener. Happy to second, but I will be coming back in.
Okay, thank you. I will open up for members' questions and comments. Councillor Cawley.
Thanks. So I only have a couple. The first one's on the Calendar Park kiosk, and I just wondered, and this is just, I'm sure, my ignorance, why we wouldn't be opening that. I can see that normally it's closed during the winter period, but bearing in mind the huge push for outdoor activity as opposed to indoor activity, whether there's an opportunity for an income stream, but it may not be a sufficient one. The second question is around the Helix, and Maureen will be able, and I've asked Maureen before, and she was keeping me up to date, was around the changing places toilet at the Helix, and is that complete? And the third bit thing was just to welcome the Trust's involvement in supporting the flu vaccination programme. It's a hugely extended programme this year, and so accessibility will be really critical to ensure ease of access. And I think that probably the last thing we need is a huge influx of flu alongside what we've got to deal with at the moment. But as we were discussing actually in a clinical and care governance for the IGIB, the indications that things like washing your hands and social distancing are actually making a difference, have made a difference in Australia, which we normally get what comes from them. So, but I just want to welcome that involvement by the Trust.
Thank you, Councillor Cawley. Maureen, do you want to comment on the changing places?
Yep, changing places toilet is complete. I think the Helix toilets are just about, were opened last weekend. The reason why we're not opening the kiosk in Calendar Park is it's not cost effective for the staffing costs versus the income that we're able to derive. So that'll open again next spring as the public plan. And as Councillor Cawley says, the vaccination programme.
Okay, thank you, Maureen. Okay, Councillor McHugh.
Just to come in there, I use Calendar Park here regularly, and there has been a ice cream van parked outside the play park with a constant queue at it, which is costing our families a fortune for the ice creams, and obviously children see them. I can't believe that the kiosk could not have provided a funding stream. Can I also ask why the cafe within Calendar House is not opened yet? And there is various other questions. The Calendar Park toilets, it's only opened at the weekends. Can I ask why that is when we have families up there all week? That's just to start with. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor McHugh. Maureen.
The ice cream van is. So the ice cream van there.
I'm sorry, Maureen, we can't hear you.
The cafe in Calendar, do you know that better? hopefully that might be a bit better now. So the
That's a
issue
bit
with
clearer.
okay. The issue with the cafe not opening yet is that we were waiting for Calendar House to be given the all clear to open. We've still got staff on furlough there, and we need to make arrangements to get a workable solution that respected the social distancing. We've now got that plan in place, and we're hoping to get the cafe open prior to the October school holidays. The toilets at Calendar Park are only getting open at the weekend because we're struggling to get enough staff to be willing to come in to clean the toilets to meet the guidelines that are required. So at this moment in time, we don't normally have toilet cleaning attendance. That's normally done by the council, but the council aren't obviously able to support that because of their resources elsewhere. So we've made arrangements to get our own staff to come to clean the toilets, and we're just trying to get additional staff willing to undertake that task.
Sorry, Councillor Harris. No, try again, Nigel. You're on mute. That's you now. Oh.
No, it's not. It's not. Can you see if you can unmute me?
You're unmuted now.
I'm unmuted now. All right. Thanks very much. Just a question which was asked at one of our locality meetings. Now, we entered phase 3 of the roadmap sometime around about the 15th of July, at which time libraries across Scotland, along with museums and galleries, could open up. And the question really is, why are we now in the middle of September and we've only just got our libraries open, and not all of them are actually open as yet? I mean, why has there been this delay? And the second question is in terms of the safety checks for reopening. I fully appreciate the reasons why we concentrated on the school estate, because that was our #1 priority, to get children back to school. But are there no or clarification really? Is it only council staff who can carry out these safety checks? Or why are there not staff within the trust organisation itself which can make the risk assessments for the trust properties? So 2 questions really. Why the delay in opening the libraries when we could have been open from the 15th of July? And are there not staff within the trust itself that could have been carrying out the risk analysis?
Okay, Maureen.
That's a better connection now. The library's point and why we couldn't get open on the 15th of July, I'll pass back to Douglas to pick up on, because we were dependent on the council carrying out the building checks and the frustrations that the customers have been receiving. In terms of safety checks, again, those are landlord responsibilities, and the council gave a very clear instruction to us not to open the buildings until they had undertaken the checks. Our staff have been carrying out checks all through the closure period. We've had staff in our buildings checking them on a regular basis, but that wasn't sufficient for the council in terms of the checks that they wanted to make. And so it's really been a matter for the council to determine when the facilities were being handed back to us. As my report noted, the council advised us on the 28th of August that we could prepare to open the facilities, and we opened the libraries within 7 working days of that being given. Thank you.
Okay, Douglas, you want to come back to testing?
And in relation to that is simply that point of having to prioritise the effort that was done. There was a significant effort had to be put towards getting the school estates reopened. There were a number of issues that arose in the course of that had to be attended to, including a fire that took place at one of the primary schools. So all of that had to be the focus of the effort of that team. And that therefore that was the basis by which their work was prioritised.
Okay, I accept that, Douglas, but I mean, there's many organisations who are opening up premises for whatever reason, have a clear template set down by their organisation as to what steps have to be taken. Now, this is true of Scout halls, it's true of churches and everything else. And the process of carrying out the risk assessment is not carried out by the Scout Association itself or by the Church of Scotland, but it's delegated down to officers within those particular organisations. Now, we've heard from Maureen that she did have staff doing safety checks and things within the buildings. I don't understand why the council could not have, using its very rigorous template, have delegated that down to the trust for them to, if they were carrying out the checks anyway, as long as they've been carried out in accordance with the council template, that we could have been utilising a bit more of the staff across the place. As I say, I fully appreciate concentrating on the school estate, but I just wonder whether there are people sitting around who could have been doing this and could have got some of these facilities open sooner, because this is, as was said at the start, there's concern in the public about the fact that things are not opening up. They look at other areas where they see that everything has been open.
Okay, I think Kenneth, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, it was really picking up Nigel's earlier point about additional resources. And one thing I was going to say is that we have been working with other contractors as well. So it hasn't simply been an effort of council staff, but particularly in relation to the schools where, as you know, there were some significant issues with quality of water. We did use other contractors. So I think in that regard, at least, we have been attempting to use other resources to come to solutions. And I think that the point I made, the point in introducing the report, and I think that comments of members reinforce this, really, that this is an exercise where we need to look back and say, well, how are we going to get this done better next time? And that might be about using resources in a different way or bringing in other. I just think we need to be open to that, because whilst I'm very aware that, and the position, in fact, is very variable across Scotland. So I'm sitting in Edinburgh where there won't be another library open for a month from now. There won't be any libraries open till then. So the position is variable, but I think the sense that this could have been done better, we need to learn the lessons. And if we do have to go through this thing again, then we ensure that these lessons have been learned.
Thanks, Kenneth, and thanks, convener.
I also think the messaging to elected members and to the public, we need to be honest with them about what's achievable and the timescales in which we can actually do things and the reasons. Douglas, did you want anything to add to that, or were you content with?
Maybe just to add back to the item we had at the start on the property review. The corporate landlord model is intended to get to grips with this kind of thing. It is a better model for coordinating how we manage our property, and probably would have helped in this instance.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gardner, since I missed you the last time, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, I was waiting. Is anybody else coming back in?
But you've got the floor, Councillor Gardner.
I thought I was on.
Councillor
okay.
Reid was waving his hand.
Yeah, I have. Councillor Gardner would say first.
Yeah, I was sort of waiting to the end, but I'll come in. I think the mood of the Executive Amendments Committee here isn't really coming across to how disappointed and how frustrated we are, and how frustrated the communities that we're representing are. Our group, when we had this very discussion, it was certainly more animated than this, and it was wanting answers as to why our trust facilities haven't opened long before now, as in some other instances it has in other areas. has there been a plan put in place? Has it been followed? In 6.2 it states it was not envisaged that the building checks process would be so time consuming and complicated. Would somebody care to explain where that blame lies? Because I can't really see it in the paper. It's just kind of left open-ended at that. And it's good to see nobody's really getting parochial, because in relation to the facilities open up, I certainly could get very parochial, considering Ward 3 is not really mentioned at all until extremely late in the programme. And my thoughts were that we'd be able to use the schools, because that's basically some of the leisure facilities we've got, and we're not allowed to do that. And so nobody in my community has got any leisure facilities for a long time, and even that's open-ended. So yes, I'd like a wee bit more on the complicated process of 6.2, please.
Okay, Maureen, is that with you?
That's with Douglas.
Douglas, right. I was just trying to find the bit in the paper. Douglas?
Our team's working through that. I mean, it is an ongoing. We're working through it. We're bringing in the external contractors and so on to help with that, and putting all the effort that we can to get these buildings reopened. But as we've said, it has to be prioritised, and we've set out how we suggest that work be undertaken. Unless we're able to source additional resources from elsewhere, then it would be difficult to advance that.
Thanks, Douglas. What I'm not getting at is why other councils and other trusts similar to our model are further advanced than us, and has the trust been pushing you enough to get these facilities up and running, to get the reports needed, to get the certificates needed? Because that's where it's a sort of, I'm getting a wee bit of a blame culture here, where one's blaming another here, and where does the buck actually lie?
There's regular meetings take place, and I think, sincerely, I think this has just been down to the pressure of work, particularly arising from the priority that was given the early days to the school estate. That's been the national priority. That's been where the effort has been put. Going back to my point earlier about corporate landlord, the council has got different people, all with a bit of responsibility about property dotted all round the council. There is not a corporate means of coordinating that effort. And the corporate landlord model, other councils do, so they do have corporate property teams who are then able to manage the various elements of that. We have that distributed across the council, and therefore when you have an exercise like this, it's more complex to organise and arrange and find the additional resource that can be put to pressure areas that arise. We're trying to sort that through that model.
Thanks, Douglas.
Okay, I've got Councillor Kerr and Councillor Reid.
Thanks, Convener. Like previous speakers, it's very frustrating for myself and the residents. Can I ask, Maureen, is there anybody working at the headquarters down in Westfield Stadium at all, or are they all working from home? That's my first question, Convener.
Maureen?
Yeah, there's nobody working in the stadium at Falkirk Stadium at the moment. We're all working at home. We've all been working at home since the 20th of March.
Right, okay, thank you. It's one of the items, Pullman Hill Snow Sports Centre saying it can't open because floodlights being investigated. Can I not open during the day without floodlights? As Councillor Colley mentioned earlier on, outside activities is what we're trying to push, especially when the summer weather. and I've had this with other areas, convener, where people are not keen to come back to work because they're getting paid the furlough. Even more so when they're getting topped up with extra 20%. So 100% wages for sitting in the house. I'm not saying that's what's happening here. I'm just saying that it makes it a lot harder to get people back. I'm glad that we're supporting Falkirk Community Trust colleagues, but it's very frustrating. Can I just get the answer on Bowman ski slope, please?
Maureen?
The ski slope has to have the same building checks done as all the other facilities, and those building checks haven't been done yet for the ski centre. So it'll get done as soon as it's practical. And as you say, is it possible? Yes, we could be using it during the day. There's very little demand during the day because it's mostly used by families and children in the out of school hours. But certainly we were keen to get the ski slope back up and running. This is a key time of year for people using the ski slope, but it will get back up and running in the programme and time that will be dictated by the checks being completed.
So, supplementary question, if I can, convener.
Okay.
Regarding the checks, have we got a timescale on if the Falkirk Community Trust was ready to open their doors at any time? At what stage are we as the council? At what stage we are that we are happy that we've done the checks on all the buildings? Because I wouldn't like to get to a stage where we're going to stage 4, the Scottish Government's roadmap, and we say, right, we're going to open a certain building, or we can't open it because the checks have not been done. At what stage are we at? Or have we got a programme to say all these checks will be done by a certain date? Is that in place?
I think that might be one for Douglas to maybe give some feedback on around the checking of all the trust buildings.
So that work underway. We've got a regular meeting takes place with the trust where we are scheduling those works and tying into the phasing for reopening that's appended to the report. And so we've got that in a constant review just to make sure that we're reaching the targets that were set there. And so we are giving it as much focus to accelerate that as far as possible.
Kenneth, you wanted to come back on that one?
Yeah, just to add to what Douglas was saying, we do now have indicative dates for all of the checks that need to be done, because that came through the corporate management team at the end of August, and that then provided a basis for what the trust have set out today. So just to add what I was saying earlier, I mean, I absolutely get the frustration and irritation of members on this, and I do think that we need to do better next time if there is a next time. What I would say is that colleagues within the organisation have worked very hard to try and get the necessary work done. I do think that in particular, as members know, there was an issue with water quality in schools, and that took up a really significant amount of resource, and that hadn't been anticipated. So I think that was a factor in that. But I do think, going back to Douglas's point, that it shouldn't matter that the colleagues in the development services, colleagues in the trust are in different organisations. We should be able to make these things work and work well. But I do think that the point about corporate landlord is right. We need to get a grip of this. We really need to get a grip of this. And I think that the proposals around about corporate landlord are important to that.
Thanks, Kenneth. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Convener. Just a passing thought, if this is how long the emergency executive will take, Lord knows how long the council meeting will take, and an appeals committee tomorrow. Anyway, yes, the use of the town halls for immunisation, the immunisation programme, that's fairly imminent, isn't it, in its commencement? And I just wondered how far forward plans were and what the practicalities were.
Okay, Maureen's phones may die shortly, so we'll try and get as much from Maureen as we can in case that happens. You able to feedback on that?
Yeah, the plan is in place. We're just in final discussions with Forth Valley about that. We've got site layouts, risk assessments, operating statements and so on all complete. So we're pretty much ready to go. We just need to sign off the contract with them and hopefully we'll do that this week.
How will it operate in terms of those attending? Will it be open house or?
No, it'll be on I think it's going to be on an invitation basis. They're going to be sending out invitations to people. It'll open 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, from 8:30 in the morning till 6 o'clock in the evening. I think the appointments will run from 9 o'clock till 5 o'clock. And it'll be run and managed by Forth Valley Health Board. We'll simply be the venue operator and making sure that the venue is safe for the public to use.
Okay, thank you, Maureen.
Okay, is there any final questions or comments? Are we happy to agree the report and obviously include the addendum that the finances will be considered at the council meeting as part of the revenue report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much, colleagues. That brings us to the end of the marathon session of the executive this morning. Can I thank everybody for their attendance and indeed for all their contributions. I think we've had some really good reports coming forward, some really challenging stuff around our recovery. And I think members of everyone has contributed and contributed in a very constructive way. So thank you everybody for their time this morning and now this afternoon, and build up your strength for full council is all I'll say. Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks to the chair.
Thanks to the chair.